seat.
I saw that. I was like, ooh.
Wait a couple minutes or get started? It's as if Bill is still with us. Do you know if Commissioner Hutt's coming? But I didn't hear his voice, so I'm not sure. Did you hear from former Commissioner Hutt that he's coming? No. Use his wordsmithing on this, I'm sure. I feel like he'd give good public comment.
All right, I guess let's go ahead and get started. All right, I will call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, March 6th, 2025. If we could start with roll call.
Roll call. It's Chair Dennison,
Here.
Vice Chair Simcock,
Here.
Commissioners Brennan,
Here.
Commissioner Moran, Commissioner Yu.
Here.
Chair Dennison, you have quorum to conduct business.
Thank you. First up, we'll look for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we'll look at the approval of the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of February 20th, 2024. Are there any proposed edits, changes, additions, or subtractions?
None.
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve as accepted, as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the February 2024 minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up is our council liaison report.
Good evening, council member, or planning commissioners, getting you at this, especially you, Chair Dennison. I am Gene Goss, and I'm going to be your council liaison for the next year. And I want you to know I missed the last meeting because I was coming late from the Council of Governments meeting, which ended at 6 when you guys adjourned. So I did see your last meeting. And my approach to all this is just to find out what you guys are doing, get to the highlights, the big stuff, and bring those to the attention of the council, which I did by looking at the tape last time. I don't have a lot to report on. The two main things we're concerned about right now, I think, are pretty obvious. The first, of course, is the rain we're experiencing and the impact that's going to have on the hillsides and the canyon with mud flows and such, and of course next week's rain events, which are significantly predicted to be significantly greater. So the city's pretty much geared up, trying to be at maximum prepared for that. We did get some kind of bad news in the last council meeting, and I got an update yesterday from the library ad hoc library project committee, which I sit on. The project, the library project, which is ensuing, is about 40 days behind schedule now, mainly because of the problems we had in January owing to the storm, and there were some design issues that had to be rectified that took time. There were some things that they hadn't anticipated in the demolition that slowed things down. So we've been assured by the project manager with Vertex that they're going to schedule themselves in such a way to bring in subcontractors working at the same time. They feel like they can truncate that, and they feel like they're going to be able to get back to schedule sometime, I think, by middle, late summer. They are anticipating meeting the deadline that we specified, which is the end of January of 2026. We need that because we need to do other things after the end of January to get the building secured, furnished, and ready to go by March 1st, which is the state deadline, which we have to face, or we could lose some or all of our funding. So it's a very serious issue, and our Public Works Director, Yanez, is working very closely with the project manager and the contractor, working to make sure that everything that's being done can be done as efficiently and as quickly as possible and still getting a quality result. So if I know more about that, when I know that we have more progress on that, I'll certainly share that with you. But I think we're not going to get any more new information in the next council's meeting than I just gave you tonight. That's all I got for you tonight, unless you have questions that I could help you with having to do with the council. Nope.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next up is community input. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Again, this is for comments for items that are not on the agenda.
We do have Fire Chief Bartlett.
Good evening, Chair Dennison and committee members, Fire Chief Bartlett. I basically just want to take this opportunity to bring to your attention and our communities, as well as since this is being recorded, we are experiencing some opportunists that are doing some scams out there. One that was brought to my attention actually kind of had my name on it, it appears, where we had some residents come into the planning department asking questions on regarding installations of windows. That if they weren't done, that our fire department was not going to save their house next time. And we had multiple residents come in to do that. So I just want to assure that the public that is not the case. Nobody from my department nor myself have been out there to do that. And we just want to make sure we're getting the messaging out there. So if you hear the same, if we can just assure the residents that that is not the case. But other than that, if you have any questions regarding that, I'm more than happy to answer them for you.
Great. Thank you, Chief Bartlett.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have a presentation from staff providing the key findings from the ADU survey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce our administrative intern, Daphne Madrigal. She will be presenting the findings from the ADU survey.
Welcome.
Hello. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. I will be presenting an overview of the findings from our accessory dwelling unit survey. So to begin, sorry, we're going to pull it up on the monitor for you. Okay. So to begin with the background of the survey was sent via email providing a link for completion on the SurveyMonkey platform. The survey was sent to all 122 reported ADU applicants from 2020 to 2024. Of those who received the survey, 31 responses were recorded. The email with the survey link was sent on December 24th, and the final response was received by January 27th of this year. The survey included 31 questions, of which 4 specifically were directed and answered only by those who rent out their ADUs, and the survey aimed to understand how Sierra Madre residents use their ADUs and to identify opportunities for ADU development. The presentation will cover questions on various aspects of ADUs, and we'll be focusing on areas such as construction, size and layout, occupancy and use, tenant information, and finance. So we first looked at the construction process. A majority of ADUs, 77%, are detached from the main house, while 23% are attached and share a common wall with the main structure. 81% of respondents did not need to demolish any existing structures for their ADU projects. As for conversions, 65% of respondents, 20 out of 31, converted an existing structure into an ADU, with a majority of these conversions, 14 out of the 20, being garages or carports. And most respondents reported completing their ADU projects within 6 to 12 months from submitting an initial application. Building on the construction details, the next topic we explored was the size and the layout of the ADUs. Most of the ADUs, or 58%, have only 1 bedroom, followed by 32% being studios and 10% having 2 bedrooms. The square footage of these ADUs ranges between 238 to 1,200 square feet, with most falling between the 200 and 600 square foot range. Additionally, 58% of respondents report that their ADU has a shared outdoor space, while the remaining units have their own private outdoor space. We next focused on occupancy. We asked questions about how the ADUs are being used and the characteristics of those residing in them. Only a small percentage, 16% of ADU owners report that their ADU is occupied by 2 or more people. The majority are either occupied by just one person or are currently vacant. Regarding parking, 65% of ADU owners indicate they do not require annual overnight parking permits, while the rest report needing at least one permit. And 74% of respondents indicate that no senior citizens live in the ADU, while 94% also confirm that no children live in the ADU either. In terms of who occupies the ADU, 32% say a relative or friend is staying for free, 29% occupy the ADU themselves, and 16% rent out their ADU, while the remaining report other circumstances, such as the ADU being under construction or used as a guest house. Now moving on from the occupancy details, we focused on the 4 respondents who are renting out their ADUs. Of these, the majority report that their tenant is a non-relative. Most of the landlords have lease agreements that are at least 1 year long, include utility costs in the rent, and find their tenants typically discovered the ADU via Zillow, and monthly rents for these ADUs range between $1,600 to $2,395. Shifting from the rental details, we now turn to the general financial aspects of the ADUs. So we asked 2 questions related to household income and ADU financing. We found that most respondents, or 55%, reported a household income of $200,000 or more. And in terms of financing, the majority, or 32%, indicated that they financed less than $50,000 for their ADU project. However, it's worth noting that a number of respondents chose to skip this question. So now that we've covered a summary of the survey results, I'll conclude with some takeaways. So we see a clear preference for detached units and conversions of existing structures. This trend suggests that ADUs are designed cost effectively and with minimal construction time by using available space without the need for extensive demolition. And most of the ADUs being built are smaller units, around 1 bedroom and between 200 to 600 square feet. And these units are generally not being occupied by more than one person, which may suggest that they are designed for singles rather than families, but it could also suggest that the ADUs are being used primarily as guest units rather than as primary residence. So to continue developing our findings about how ADUs are being used, we've been reviewing survey feedback and making adjustments to improve the responses we receive, and as more ADUs are finalized, we plan to send the survey to new ADU owners as well. So thank you, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Daphne. I'm happy to take any questions of the commission, but I'd like to follow up and say that this survey will continue to be distributed at times when the ADUs are finished at their construction stage.
Any questions for staff? All right, great presentation. Will you send that along to the Planning Commission so that we have a copy of that?
We'll send the PowerPoint, and we also have a link available that you can view that data yourself.
Great, thank you. All right, next up, we'll have a disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Anybody want to start?
I drove by the site today. I had no contact with anybody at the site, but I happened to go at the same time as Mr. Brennan. And so we walked around but did not discuss anything on site.
I drive by it all the time. So I didn't run into anybody.
It's on
Every
my
day,
it's
yeah.
on my regular route home as well, so I'm very familiar with the site.
I also drove by the site, as Commissioner Simcock mentioned, at the same time.
Nothing to disclose.
All right. Next up, we have a public hearing, variance 25-01 and discretionary demolition permit 25-01. Does staff have a presentation for us?
Thank you, Commissioner. Tonight I will be reporting on this application with a presentation. Just bring that up. So this is for the project at 238 Auburn Avenue. This is an application for variance and a discretionary demolition permit. The application is a request to remove and replace a single-family home which was built in 1890 and also to incorporate an accessory dwelling unit. That project will require demolition of the single-family residence built in 1890, and therefore a discretionary demolition permit is required. And the deviation from the following zoning standards: a height of the ADU, front yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, front covered porch projecting into the front setback, and placement of habitable buildings is requested for variance in this application. The project is located at the southeast corner of Grandview Avenue and Auburn Avenue. It is in the residential medium density land use in the R2 zone. It is a 9,600 square foot lot. It is a reverse corner lot with primary frontage on the wider side, and it is within vicinity of Sierra Madre Elementary School. So the main building is at the south end of the lot. It is a single-family home originally built in 1890. This building is proposed for removal with a replacement project. The accessory building is a garage and workshop. It is at the north end of the property, and it was built in 1990. This is the building that will be proposed with an alteration addition that includes the ADU and a new location for the workshop. Here are some photos of the main building taken at ground level. On the east side, you can see a close-up of the exterior showing some disrepair. The north and south side are gable ends, each with a balcony. The north side has an exterior stairway up to it. Here are some photos taken of the garage and workshop. The garage has adequate space for 2 cars. Attached to the south of the workshop has a covered porch wrapping around to the southwest corner. I also want to point out at this time the staff report erroneously indicates that this is a 3-car garage and that one of those spaces would be removed. That's not the case, actually. So at the north end of the property, I also want to point out that there is a driveway approach, but no driveway. This is likely to be a remnant of the past, in which case a curb and gutter were not installed to replace the abandoned driveway approach. That's the photo at the bottom right of the slide. So moving on to site analysis, on the left of the screen is the existing site plan, and on the right is the proposed site plan. So in terms of parking, there is existing 4 full-size spaces, 2 open and 2 enclosed. And proposed, let me go back. Proposed, there will be 1 to activate that existing driveway approach for a total of 5 spaces, 2 uncovered, 2 covered and 3 open. Also want to point out that the minimum requirement for this project is for 2 covered spaces and 1 open space for the ADU. So that's to say that this project would meet and exceed those standards. So to maintain the single-family character of the neighborhood, condition of approval number 2.6 requires all parking areas on site to be maintained free and clear of any obstructions and made available for parking of operable vehicles. So number 1 here, we're looking at the lot coverage. It's in the shaded areas here. In the existing, we have a 29.1% lot coverage. In the proposed, that will be increased to 36.3%. And you can see that there's some give and take. The red shaded area is the removed area, and the blue shaded area is the added. Also want to point out that unlike the R313 zone's development standards, lot coverage for the R2 zone only pertains to buildings and not, for example, driveways or patio covers. Number 2 is the building separation here. It's being decreased from 39 feet 3 inches to 20 feet. And number 3 and 4 is the lot width and depth. This lot has a width of 150 feet and its depth is 64 feet. Moving on to the trees here. There is 1 coast live oak of interest highlighted on screen now. Its trunk is on the neighboring property, but most of its canopy covers the subject property and extends over a portion of the garage. Addition and remodeling of the workshop does not extend to the area. So you can see that shaded area is the whole building. The outlined area in that building is the area of work. South of the oak is a Chinese elm. Although it may be impacted by the construction work, it is not a protected tree. So there will be some grading work between the two structures to flatten at grade with the main building for a maximum grade cut as deep as 6 feet. As a result, tree removal is being done, as you can see in the shaded, the red shaded trees. But at the south end, there will be a liquid amber that can be conserved. So guidelines for conservation include protective fencing around the root zone of the oak tree before work begins and until the project is finished. Avoiding soil compaction in the root zone and avoiding trenching for utilities in the root zone and instead boring at a depth no less than 36 inches below. For the oak tree, I want to point out that last slide there was a parking pad shown in that area, and that can be a potential conflict. So in plan check review, the arborist may be asked to provide additional information, including but not limited to a more accurate representation of the tree root zone to determine whether installation of a parking space would conflict with the conservation of the oak tree. The Planning Commission should consider that should the case be that the parking space is in conflict with the conservation of the coast live oak, that the applicant be required to demolish the driveway approach and install a curb and gutter to mitigate any drainage, sheet flow, or ponding issues that the driveway approach may currently be causing. Moving on to building analysis, the existing home is a structure non-conforming with the front and rear setbacks, as well as the placement of habitable buildings. The front porch is also non-conforming in its projection into the front yard. A few slides ago, I pointed out that the lot is shallow with a depth of 40 feet. So with a 25-foot front yard setback and a requirement to place a building no less than 20 feet from the rear property line, a depth of only 19 feet is available for the enclosed and habitable portion of the main dwelling unit, which is represented by the area shaded in blue on screen. For reference, 19 feet is the same depth as a standard open-air parking space, so it's quite shallow. In the proposed project, the standards that are non-conforming are sustained. I indicate here that those standards are non-compliant because the proposal entails construction of a new home, not modification or alteration to the existing. However, the non-conforming rear setback is improved with an additional depth of 6 feet for the yard. There's also a subtle increase to the front yard as the depth of one of the front porch is smaller than the existing by 5 inches. So here on screen, what we're seeing is on the left, the existing, all those notes indicated in yellow are existing non-conforming standards with setbacks. And on the right is the proposed, all those indicated in red are those sustained non-conforming conditions. So now I'm moving on to the building floor plan. Again, on the left is existing, right is proposed. And there isn't much to say with the purview of the application, but I wanted to also demonstrate what kind of programming fits into a code-compliant 19-foot depth. So that looks a little bit like this. As you can see, by trimming everything down, the kitchen and 2 rooms are lost. And so that's actually what's being proposed, not the former. Moving on to the second floor, I've done the same kind of analysis here. At the second floor, there is proposed 4 bedrooms and I think 2 bathrooms, maybe 3 bathrooms. At a 19-foot depth, you're losing 2 of the bathrooms and 1 bedroom. Onto building elevations. This one is the one I point out the height because this is where height is seen in its greatest. The proposed at the bottom of the screen is going to be 4 inches taller than the existing, but there are going to be new dormers facing the street that lend to an appearance of an even taller building as perceived from standing at street level. However, the proposed height is far below the 30-foot maximum, only reaching 23 feet and 1 inch. I also want to point out that the patio and the balcony off the second level of the south end will not be returning in the new home. So the following elevations, I don't point out the height here just because the height as measured in these elevations is less than what was shown already. But here's the primary facade, and you can see above is the existing, below is the proposed. And the proposed, you can see that there's a grade cut demonstrated here at the building's north. and retaining walls will be built to support the grade cut and topped with a 42-inch fence. So the first thing you're going to may notice, is how much wider the new home will be. It's approximately 20 feet wider. And to maintain the single-family character of the neighborhood, condition of approval 2.5 restricts the front porch from being enclosed between the heights of 3 feet and 7 feet. That's consistent with the requirements of the R1 development standards for front porches. And moving to the north elevation, here you can see also that the stair is being removed along with that balcony, and there are going to be new street-facing dormers, as you can see from this angle as well. And here from the backyard, you can see that same 20-foot expansion with the second dormer going in place. Now moving on to the building analysis at the northern building. And you can see that the non-conforming conditions are with the rear setback and the side yard setback, which is a secondary street front yard setback. So the addition comes 12 feet 5 inches close to the front yard, which is non-conforming, where a 25-foot front yard setback is required. In that space, on top is an ADU, but below is the workshop. And the workshop is in question here as a request for variance. It comes into play as a 12-foot 5 setback structure. I just shaded those buildings in for you. Moving on to the elevations. Again, this building is not being changed much in terms of its height elevation, but it is increasing in height due to the lower level addition. So that is going from a 16-foot 3-inch height to a 22 feet 6-inch height to add a lower level. And I've also demonstrated here the 12-foot 5 distance from front property line on the building elevation at the bottom of the screen. And regarding the ADU, I just wanted to note that although our height in the R2 zone is permitted up to 30 feet, ADUs in this case are restricted to a maximum height of 16 feet. And so what you're looking at on the elevation in the proposed is what appears to be a 6-panel nano door for the workshop, and next to that on its right is the entrance to a stairwell that leads up to the ADU. This is the lower level entrance for the ADU. Also want to point out that a front yard setback may be enforced on an ADU, but not to the extent that it precludes an ADU of at least 800 square feet. So the ADU proposed here is 794 square feet. All right, and from the front elevation, the addition will project a small portion forward while enclosing a wraparound porch for the ADU. From the perspective standing at the corner of Auburn and Grandview, the workshop below the ADU will be subterranean, but from the south end of the property standing at Auburn, the workshop will be visible as shown in the previous slide, though somewhat obscured by the main building. So there's also an entrance to the ADU at this level. That's next to the garage doors. Here's the north end. The addition will be apparent from the north elevation, though stepped back from the existing wall about 33 feet. A third entrance to the ADU, and this one is directly into the bedroom, can be seen there on the center of the building. And here's the elevation from the backyard. As you can see, there's not a lot of changes here, but you can see the enclosure of that part of the porch. There's some removal of the windows and a new window for the bathroom. So just to summarize all the project data that we went over, there's a lot to go over. So I've only highlighted those parts that are for the variance. That is, again, is the main building's front yard setback, rear yard setback, the garage's front yard setback for workshop, and the accessory dwelling unit's height at 22 feet 6 inches. Not shown on screen is the encroachment of the front porch into the front yard setback as well. So in terms of studying this variance and to determine whether this is a granting of a special privilege, I wanted to do a study of other properties in the area. So other than 238 Auburn, there are 2 reverse corner lots in the R2 zone within this vicinity. 95 West Laurel, and 92 West Laurel. 95 faces West Laurel Avenue and is wider than it is deep, but 92 actually faces Auburn Avenue and is deeper than it is wide, like a traditional interior lot. So 238 Auburn Avenue has a lot size that is unique in that it has the most shallow depth amongst its comparable lots, and the depth is less than half its width, lending to its challenging development. So in terms of making findings for this variance, staff had found that the conditions of the variance ensure that the approval is not a grant of special privileges as we just went over. I also detailed some conditions of approval that would restrict the full enclosure of the front porch and to have the parking kept clear and free of any obstructions to allow for parking on site. I also found that the variance does not change the use of the property. It maintains a single-family residential character where other developments in single-family zones are allowed a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit. The size of the property is unique in that it is a reverse corner lot with a width twice as wide as it is deep, and there are no other reverse corner lots within this neighborhood in the R2 zone that are of that characteristic. The shallow depth of the lot limits reasonable development. Again, I pointed out that that was only 19 feet depth of enclosed area. Therefore, granting the variance facilitates the reasonable use of the land to be developed with a single-family home and an accessory dwelling unit. And the variance is consistent with the general plan in that it meets objectives L20, policies L20.1, .5, .7, and .8. I've included those policies as attachment G to the staff report. For the discretionary demolition permit, a historic evaluation assessment was conducted and concluded that it is not eligible for listing as a historic landmark. There had been a number of alterations to the property over years that have disqualified it from eligibility. A waste management plan with either Athens or an approved hauler will be used and as approved by the Public Works Department to comply with all requirements for demolition. Demolition of the existing single-family home is economically feasible, is the only economically feasible option, whereas preservation of a non-historic structure would increase costs, thereby reducing quality of the improvement. The demolition is being approved with a replacement single-family home, which is consistent with general plan objective L22 and policy L22.3. And the demolition facilitates economically feasible development for overall improvement to the residential character of its neighborhood. Tonight, the Planning Commission has the alternatives to approve based on Planning Commission Resolution 2502, which grants approval of the variance and discretionary demolition permit. The request being to demolish the existing single-family home built in 1890 and construct a replacement project with variances, as well as an accessory dwelling unit with variances. Planning Commission may also, Planning Commission may approve the project with modifications. Planning Commission may also deny the project, citing those findings that it cannot make, or continue the subject project and provide direction to the applicant and staff. Staff's recommendation is to approve Planning Commission Resolution 2502, granting approval of variance 2501 and discretionary demolition permit 2501. That concludes my presentation. I also have the property owner and the architect here. I think the property owner would like to make an introduction.
Good evening. We're the Emanuels, 238 Auburn. We are very excited for this project. We got married at Alverno. We spent 2 years in a house actually on Auburn. I used to walk the dog every day by this property and could just see the potential in it, and always told myself someday someone's gonna do something great with it, and it kind of fell to us and we got the opportunity. So we're very excited. We've gone through all the historic reviews and all those things, and we hired a genius architect who specializes in restoration of old homes, and we've gone through it all and tried to come up with a plan. And I think what we have is great, and we're excited. Our two children, 6 and 4, are not here because they cause too much of a ruckus. But they're enrolled at Sierra Madre Elementary School. It'll be nice to be able to just walk them down each day. And so we're very excited, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Questions for staff?
I have no questions.
No, I don't.
I have a question. One of the variance findings that we're looking to make is allowing the height of an ADU. If that area were not to be an ADU, what other variances would they have to apply for?
All the other variants that were listed, so that would be the front yard setback for that accessory structure at 12 feet 5 inches still because of the workshop being programmed at that area, along with the front yard setback for the main house, the encroachment into the front yard for that porch, and the approval of the rear yard setback as it is, and the placement of the building less than 20 feet from your rear property line.
So the fact that that area is considered an ADU is not changing any square footage or lot coverage or any concerns that would, if it were not considered an ADU, count separately, count differently?
I think the lot coverage I calculated included the ADU, but I do believe that an ADU can be kind of exempted in a way as it's proposed, or it can be approved regardless of whether it meets lot coverage requirements, because it is an ADU below 800 square feet.
Right, but the only reason it's going to be an ADU is because it's getting a variance on the height. So my concern is, one of the findings we have to make is that we're not granting somebody something special because we're making findings. And so my concern is that because it is an ADU, if it were not an ADU, what would that do to the project? Does that make sense, the question I'm asking?
So, yes. I think the way I can understand this is if it were instead a full dwelling unit and not an ADU, there would be no need for a variance.
Okay.
Because it is below the 30 feet height.
Actually, there would be. The reason why we made the second floor an ADU instead of the downstairs was because if it was a secondary unit, it would have to have a 25-foot front yard setback. Isn't that correct?
Yes, so that would also require the front yard setback variance. If it were not a ADU, but instead a full dwelling unit, it is located 12 feet 5 inches from the front property line, so that would require a front yard variance.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if this was mentioned in the staff report, but we have a very unique circumstance here. I don't think this commission has ever looked at an ADU, and the reason the commission has never looked at an ADU is because under state law, ADUs are processed ministerially. They get all the state protections, including ministerial review, if they stay within the development standard bounds. The applicant here has chosen to go beyond those bounds and is now applying for a variance. So that's why this is before you today. I'm not sure if it was mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. And that's why I wanted to make sure that by granting it a variance to be an ADU, that we weren't obviating any other codes that would need some kind of a variance if it were not, right? So, it sounds like they need a 25-foot setback that we got to give a variance for regardless of whether or not it's an ADU. So it's, there's nothing special conveyed by granting this variance. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff? All right. At this time, we will take community input. Any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is on the agenda, and we are looking for community input on this specific agendized item. Please keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes.
I just want to say that I did submit a letter for my husband and myself.
If you can come up, we'll need to hear you.
I did forget to mention that the commission was forwarded one public comment received by email.
I don't need to take all your time up since seems like it's moving forward, but it was essentially in support of the demolition. We've lived next, my name is Leslie Schrager, my husband is Patrick Pyle. We have lived next to this property on the south side for the past 25 years. So I feel like we have a very unique, unique situation that we've observed this property for many years. So I did submit something. I don't know if all of you had a chance to read it, so okay, I don't want to take the time, but I just wanted to make sure that it was received, and just to let you know that we are very excited about this project. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? All right, we'll bring it back for deliberation. Who'd like to start?
I would like to bring up one point that's a point of concern for me, and I certainly acknowledge the geography of this lot. It's very challenging, and so certainly, you know, the project itself, very supportive of it. I'm a little concerned with, we have many variances happening here. I'm a little concerned just visually with the front setback, and I understand it's currently 11 feet 1 inch on the main house, and that's going to continue. And then the setback on the workshop is going to then be 12.5 because it's going to be brought out. And I'm just, and understanding we have many variances happening here. When I look at the property and when I'm standing to the south of the property and I look down the property, it is very noticeable that even the current house as it's sitting is very close to the street side, much more so, as we know, than the other properties. And again, I appreciate the fact that there's an adjustment to the variance on the rear side of the property, very supportive of that. But visually, and I believe, right, that in the new structure, that new structure is going to be much more substantial looking because of the height, et cetera, than even though we're at the same height, but because of the expanse of the second story, I do think it's going to be a little bit more obvious that we've got a very visible variance here. And I'm just wondering if there's any consideration for us to talk about that a little bit, not to certainly go back to what's required, but to ease up on that encroachment into the street side. And I'm talking, for me personally, I'm talking a matter of feet here. I'm not talking more about that, but it's 11 feet to the street side feels very small. And I'm just imagining the new structure. So I'd like to put that out to the rest of the commissioners.
I live in the canyon, where we don't have any setbacks anywhere, and I find it very lovely. So, you know, I feel like Sierra Madre is quite eclectic, and it is the case that everything isn't the same. And yes, if every house had, you know, these tiny setbacks all throughout the city, I think it would get a little old. But for me, given the unique character of the lot and the fact that we are, you know, struggling as a city to increase density and other things, the fact that this lot has accommodations for being able to house so many, especially close to the elementary, which is highly attractive, I'm fully in support of the variances.
Can I ask a quick staff question?
Absolutely.
If this lot were hypothetically on Grandview facing, so we call Grandview, what would the setback on, like the southwest corner of Grandview is the same type of lot. I don't think it's as deep, but I noticed when I was looking through the area, yeah, it sticks out. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It's 10 feet, not 10, but 11 feet. And the rest of the street's 25. And I like a little bit of consistency in there, but if this were the other way, would that side yard setback be 10 feet?
That's a great question, thank you. And we actually contemplated that very early on in the consultation for this project. This is the reverse corner lot, so that means that the lines that are adjacent to the street are continuous with front lot lines adjacent to that property. So on Grandview, that lot line is continuous with the front lot line. So if this were oriented toward Grandview, the Auburn side setback would still be 25 feet. So we'd be still looking at the same condition.
Okay, thank you.
The overall height of the new structure, I was looking at the plans, because they've kind of sunk in the whole structure. I think it's only sitting about 2-3 feet higher than what the existing house was, right? Am I reading that right?
My understanding is that it is 4 inches taller, but I'm not entirely sure whether the foundation is lowering in elevation. Maybe the architect can clarify. So the elevation of the building pad is not changing.
Oh,
So the ridge is only a couple inches difference.
Yeah, okay. So it's only a couple inches, okay. Because they've sunken it with it, okay. I think the solution that they found in being able to build this makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is dropping off as you're going from the northern part to the southern part. And being able to kind of step it down makes a lot of sense to me, to utilize the site much better. And at the end of the day, you actually end up with a similar height structure on the south side of it. On Auburn, I understand what you're saying about the setback being reduced potentially, but it's very similar in the way we're treating the roof, how it's stepping down and onto a porch area. I don't think a foot or so would make that much of a difference. And I also appreciate the fact that the dormers are set in, so that you're not looking at the southern house actually looking up would never really see the dormer because of the way that it's stepped back. You might see the top of the ridge of it, slightly, but it doesn't have the same impact as when you're looking at the elevation. Of course, it looks like it's humongous because you're looking at it as if you're hovering 20 feet up in the air, looking straight at it, right? So the effect of that dormer, I think, is actually going to be very minimal. You're going to basically see the picture of the roof coming down, very similar to it, and you're able to fully utilize, the underside of that other structure. I think it's a good solution. And from what I see of the details of the architecture, I think it's going to be in keeping with a lot of the things that are already going on. And so I'm good with supporting it. So.
I agree with the comments about the elevation. I'm not concerned about the elevation so much. I think that what makes this lot, even though it's set so close, the southern building, not appear as if it's over dominating, is that the northern building is set so far back. And so my initial instinct was similar to yours, that it kind of sticks out there and makes this big front all the way up against the street. Now, that said, it's a tiny little lot oriented in a difficult way. And so I could probably make the unique shape and programming of the lot be a one-off rather than a precedent for future development of that way, in my mind. At a certain point, pulling it back, I think, just changes the utility of that area. But I agree that it's definitely gonna make it, by pulling that back and having a different articulation from the street, I think it would make the whole lot feel a little smaller. But I don't think that's something that I would force. How strongly do you feel about
it? I guess one question would be, in terms of alteration, and I want to find a solution here, but the depth of the porch as an example at, I think it's 9 feet. Is there architectural standards? I mean, are there any compromise? I guess I don't feel strongly to deny it, but I do think it's going to be, we're not making I think we could make grounds. We're not making a special exception.
Yeah.
But I'm also cognizant of the neighbors supportive, et cetera.
I thought of that very thing, and I'm like, so what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to make it like 6 feet.
Yeah.
And now I put a chair out there, and
Right.
nobody can
And
walk
there's
around me, and it just basically kind of becomes a
Or we'd have to
unusable.
start altering the setback on the rear to the property, right, which is 6 feet,
Right.
going from 2.5 to 6.
No, looking around it today, I had the same feeling about the setback and how close it looked. And then I honestly thought after I left and sitting here tonight, I think I've probably driven past. I was born across the street, 2 doors down. I went to that school. I've driven by it for 55 years. I've never noticed that until today. And so maybe I noticed that because I'm looking at it because I'm sitting in this chair. And so one thing, if this house were to be, it is in disrepair and it's becoming an eyesore over the last many, many years. And if it was to be saved and kind of remodeled and redone today, I wouldn't have a problem with it. And honestly, that's what the architect plans kind of, it's a little bit bigger, but it's where it's been for 134 years. That porch, you know, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, it'd almost be more jarring if it suddenly like moved back or something, since we're all used to it there.
Well, I think we were talking about probably the workshop, right?
Oh.
Because the workshop is I understand what you're saying about the porch on the southern building.
I'm saying both. I mean,
Yeah.
in essence,
Right.
we're creating a larger frontage on the primary residence, and then we're continuing that same line, albeit a foot off, right front. I appreciate the discussion amongst the commissioners. So I don't feel strongly. I wanted to raise it as a point of concern that I certainly had. So
I agree. It was
appreciate the discussion.
it was the first thing I saw as well. So I definitely agree with that. But
Just to kind of add a little bit, I think I see what you're saying. We could reduce it down just because it feels maybe like it's sticking out a little too much. But just looking at it on the architectural side of it, you're going to get a harsh kind of late afternoon sun that's going to come into that, and a lot of their window is on that face too. It would be really nice to have a good size overhang on the porch too, because you're capturing and you're being able to shade a lot of that glass there, and it would be a more usable porch, right? In that sense.
Right.
I would say that if we can, I would like to keep it the dimensions that they're showing. I think it's gonna make a difference on the usability of that porch. So.
And I'd rather have the ADU come out towards the street. It's not even as far as that house. Than go up on top of that garage or something, you know. So.
it is on top.
Yeah, but it's on top, but it's not on top.
Yeah. It's articulated.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sounds like we have some consensus here. So I will look for a motion.
I make the motion that we recommend approval to, adopt resolution 2502 with grading permit 2501, or demolition permit 2501.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right. Next up, we have a discussion, a consideration of amendments to city procedures in the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to streamline and facilitate the redevelopment of structures damaged by the Eaton fire. Does city attorney have a presentation for us?
Yes, Chair. If staff wouldn't mind bringing up the Word document, and I'll provide some context for this discussion. The first is that there were a lot of city departments involved in crafting the staff report. As you can see, there are 8 names listed, and that's not even everyone, because this touches on a lot of different things besides zoning. The reason it's before you is because we wanted the Planning Commission to work this up and work up the ordinance before it goes to the City Council. We're thinking in terms of a timeline. Today, you're going to receive the staff report. On the 20th, at your next meeting, you'll receive the ordinance, assuming you direct me to go draft a staff report, an ordinance. And then on the 25th, we're going to take it to council. So this is going to move quickly because there's a need to move quickly. Before I continue, since I had the floor, I just wanted to introduce Julia from our office. As you all probably know, Thais has moved to Orange County and has decided to focus, still within our firm, but decided to focus on labor law. so she won't be representing the Planning Commission anymore. And so for that purpose, we've brought in Julia. She's going to be sitting in the gallery today, but at the next meeting, we may be switching seats for a portion of the meeting. All right, so moving on. This staff report, working on it? This staff report, we provided notice to all property owners that I believe whose homes were destroyed or damaged by the fire. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We provided notice to everyone whose homes where homes were destroyed. We did not have everyone's contact if the home was just damaged, though. So we sent the notice of this meeting out to everyone who we had contacts for.
Can you remind me the count? Destroyed houses.
There are 14 single-family homes destroyed.
So again, today we're just going to go through the relevant portions of the staff report, and at the end of the staff report, we're looking for a motion to direct the city attorney, based on the feedback from the commission, to return with an ordinance. So jumping into the staff report, if we could scroll down. Big picture, this conversation is going to be split up into two parts. The first is regarding the debris removal. So, as you may be aware, there are two procedures by which residents can avail themselves of debris removal. The first is through the county. So the county is handling all debris removal, and the county and the Army Corps of Engineers, if property owners opt into that program. If they choose not to opt into that program, then it's going to be on the city, and we're going to rely on our demolition permit process. What we're proposing here in this first part, if you could scroll down a little further, a little more, where it says discretionary demolition permits, right? That's where we are in this discussion. What we're proposing here is waiving the discretionary demolition, the discretionary portion of the demolition permit, so it's going to be handled ministerially. And we have Senior Analyst Carlson here, who I believe is the one who issues the demolition permit. So if you have specific questions about how the demolition permit is handled ministerially, you can ask him. We're also going to be, and I'll talk about this more a little bit later, waiving the historical resources evaluations that we do before we issue demolition permits if the property has burned to the ground. So if it's red tagged, correct? Correct. So if it's been red tagged, then we're proposing that we not burden the applicant with the cost of historical resources evaluations. And I'll tell you how we're going to treat historical resource evaluation later on in the presentation. Let me stop here because really with respect to debris removal, this is the first part. This is the only part with respect to debris removal. We're including as part of this ordinance, so we get one holistic ordinance. And we have at least two property owners that are going to avail themselves of this procedure. But let me stop here and see if you have any questions about the demolition permit process for removing debris from your home.
So you're saying that for the city of Sierra Madre, because it's different than Altadena, of course, but in Altadena, there's a phase 1, phase 2, and they can opt in. They could either have the county do it, or they could have it done through a private, business. And if it's done through a private business, of course, they have to get reimbursed by the insurance if it's a part of their insurance. In the county one, the county will take care of it, but then they'll also bill the insurance company for whatever it's allowable. So you're saying that here it would be more of they can opt into the county one or the city, not a private. Is that a third option, or is that just?
I'll let Senior Analyst Carlson answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Yo. You're correct, and the Eaton fire encompasses the county of Los Angeles, which is Altadena, Pasadena, and Sierra Madre, as well as the Palisades area. They all may avail themselves to the phase 1, phase 2, the right of entry. The county will administer the Army Corps of Engineer to do the fire debris removal. We do have 3 parcels, I believe, that are pursuing the opt-out. So the city is in a position to use its municipal code, its existing municipal code, to regulate the fire debris removal for those 3 parcels. I don't know if I answered your question, but
So what you're kind of saying is that they could go private, but as a city, we want to offer it to them to be able to remove the debris?
well, sure, yeah, I recall now.
What were you saying?
Well, the city won't be removing the debris. So if you opt out, we will issue you a permit to have the fire debris removed by a contractor.
Got it.
So it's basically the same as Altadena? I mean, they can go county,
You're just
or
giving
they can go
permission to
private.
do it private, yeah.
We're just,
But if you do it private, you have to have a permit to do it.
right.
We're making the permit process easier because it can be ministerial,
same
which
as the
means he just says, yes, you can, and it doesn't have to go before.
Well, there's not, we're not waiving every requirement. You know, there are some requirements for.
Yeah, not like, you
Right.
know, right away, but it's in your hands to say,
It's gonna be
yes,
in our
you
hands,
can,
yeah.
versus having it discussed.
You might not know the answer to this, but there seems to be some sort of schedule that's going on over in Altadena of what things or which houses are getting all of that. Do we have any sense for, are we at the tail end of everything here, or are they gonna hopscotch? It doesn't seem to make sense for them to come over here, do a house, do 10 over there, and come back and do 1, right? So
Sure, and that's
do
a
we have
great
any kind of
question too.
idea?
And staff participates in 4 or 5 task force meetings every week. So I've been, involved with this discussion, and from what we've been told and what we've seen is for those that opt in, they want the county to administer the Army Corps of Engineers to do the removal. It's starting in the middle and it's going out. That would lead me to believe that Sierra Madre is on the latter part of the schedule.
Got it. Because that might help homeowners decide if they're gonna do it one way or the other, right? So, thank you.
Any other questions on the demolition permit?
I don't think a question, no.
Okay.
So you show in your report that you're suspending a couple of chapters, but then you specifically call out suspending subsections. So can you help us understand which of those is accurate? I'm looking at page 2, bottom of page 2.
Bottom of page 2. Suspending chapter 1760.056.
Yes.
So we're going to be suspending we're suspending the discretion. We're going to suspend the discretionary demolition permit process, which includes historical resources evaluation, because that's the primary reason why you have discretionary review for demolition permits, is to determine whether or not the property is historic before you demolish it. So we're going to suspend that chapter, and then the second one is suspending the subsection B and K of section 1504.115. That's not in the zoning code, and Senior Management Carlson can talk about why that's the case.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have a really quick way to explain that. It's chapter 17 is termed discretionary demolition permit. It really is a relatively new part of our municipal code, and it is it's really taking the historical consideration of demolition permits. About 7 years ago, there was a historical building that was demolished. There was outcry. Chapter 17 was created. Chapter 15 I like to refer to as our traditional demolition process. And Chapter 15 is really where the Department of Public Works comes into effect. Chapter 17 is really the planning department because of the historical preservation. So the staff report indicates that we're pretty much suspending all of Chapter 17, the historical content, and then the subsections B and K for the traditional demolition process.
And the projected savings, it's in your staff report, but by avoiding the discretionary demolition process, applicants are saving $3,600 approximately. They will be charged $284 for the process that our analyst oversees.
And I presume we're also saving money as a city because we're spending less time discussing it.
Well, there's this $3,630 figure should represent full cost recovery, so
Oh, okay.
it's net for us,
Mhm.
but it saves the applicant money.
Yeah.
Any more questions about the demolition?
Great, thank you.
Okay, now moving from demolition and debris removal to the actual rebuilding process. The rebuilding process is also split up into two separate conversations. The first part of this conversation is going to be about subdivisions and the zoning code. And the second portion is going to be about the building code. Subdivision and the zoning code, entitlements, building, post-entitlements. So the first amendment we're proposing is waiving discretionary review for the R1 Family Residential Zone, RC Residential Canyon Zone, and the Hillside Management Zone. So by waiving discretionary review, all permits would be processed, redevelopment permits for these properties will be processed by staff. And the reason for that is really time and money. It moves the process along faster and it saves the applicant money. I'll pause on this one because the development standards discussion, I think Senior Planner Wolf can explain better if you want to talk about the 10% development standard.
So the county and the governor order really is established to allow for 110% of the development that was there before. And we apply that 110% rule to development standards to allow for the reconstruction. And so the additional provisions I wanted the Planning Commission to consider were for additional 10% floor area to whether for streamlining the effort, permit a fixed amount of square footage based on 10% the average size of homes destroyed. So we know what the average home or the average size of homes destroyed was, and that's about 2,500 square feet. 10% would be 250. In our task force meetings, we've coordinated with other cities. So I already know that City of Pasadena is doing something similar to allow for a minimum, and that would allow, for example, an 800 square foot home that was lost up to 250 square feet instead of just 80 square feet additional. And that would be in a like-for-like scenario, but that doesn't mean that someone couldn't just propose a whole new home way beyond 110% of the floor area, and it still be something that is permitted by code, by right. The second part here is if the existing or the pre-existing structure had more than one story, permit the rebuild at the same or fewer number of stories and allow for an additional 10% floor area to expand any combination of the pre-existing first and second story. The idea here is to allow for those expansions, but not to allow, in a like-for-like rebuild scenario, the construction of a brand new second story in the reconstruction effort. That doesn't mean that someone couldn't do that, but that would be subject to potentially a discretionary review.
If I could pause for a moment then. So if they choose to build within the guidelines we set, then it's going to be subject to ministerial review. If, just like we saw in the variance example, they choose to go and build something greater outside of the boundaries we set in this staff report and in the future ordinance, they'll have to come before the Planning Commission. The projected savings here, if you live in the R1 or RC zone, is saving $8,136 for a design review permit, and then for a hillside management permit, it's $11,986. That doesn't mean the applicant won't spend something. They're going to spend something on staff's time. I don't know if you have an estimate of what that permit cost at the ministerial level.
Yeah, if we're just doing a like-for-like rebuild, all of the consultation is not recovered in cost, but I think it's been analyzed in the building permit. So building permit does involve some planning consultation, and we recover that cost through building permits.
Do you have an approximate number of what that would cost? Any idea? If you don't know, it's okay.
For 1 hour of time, I want to say that's about $240.
So it's significantly less than if they went through the discretionary process for design review or for the hillside management zone. So I'll pause here. Any questions on this one?
Yes.
I do have, yeah. So I know we're focusing on money here, which is fine. How much time is it going to save?
Discretionary reviews vary in time. I've seen some as little as 3 months and
Right.
some as much as 2 years. So
Right.
it's hard to say, but on average, between 6 months and 1 year. So that's a
Okay.
lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think even though, yeah, the money's good, the insurance is probably going to pay for that someday. Hopefully, I don't know if everybody was insured. I hope they were. But yeah, I think time to me is the big one, you know. So
Yeah.
that's whatever we can do to make it fast.
So I want to, sorry, other questions?
Oh, go ahead.
Um,
Still formulating.
You use the term like for like. What does that mean to you?
So like for like means anything that falls within that 110% rule we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's not the look, it's the square footage.
And
Yeah,
that
so
can-
it's not matching the existing pad that was there. It's if you had 1,000 square foot house, you can have an 1,100 square foot house. But you're saying that you're using a prevailing square footage bonus rather than a pre-existing square footage bonus. What I mean by that is you're saying you're going to average everybody's square footage across the 14 homes that were fully destroyed, and whatever that square footage is, 10% of that. So, am I understanding that right?
Correct. So that provides a baseline minimum allowance that might be more than 110%, but that is so it's going to be the rule of the greater of 110% the floor area or 250 square feet. And again, that's to allow the
Oh,
structures that were 1,000 square feet, up 250 square feet additional instead of just 100 square feet additional.
Oh.
And you said
So
that Pasadena's doing that too?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So if I can just play a little devil's advocate here, if a home had been built, and I don't know any of these houses, if a home had already been built to 99% of their allowable coverage, because of this, without any kind of review, they'd get to exceed that.
So that is a point I wanted to bring up, and that's a little later in that section of the staff report, is where the prior development standards met or exceeded 110% of the required development standards. The Planning Commission should consider whether to permit an additional 10% variance for those non-conforming conditions and whether to allow continuation of non-conforming parking standards in the rebuilding of a non-conforming primary dwelling unit that exceed 110% of the applicable development standards. Does that make sense?
So you can establish that limitation if
Yeah.
that's the recommendation.
Yeah.
So that it not exceed whatever the development standards are under the zoning code.
I feel like we could do that and just say that it needs to meet at least the planning setbacks and all of that. It has to be within the buildable area, right? I mean, we could put that in.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of things that we
Yeah,
should,
like-
are you looking for that kind of guidance tonight, or are you looking for that kind of guidance when
Yeah.
you come back?
No, I
Tonight.
think that type of guidance tonight would be helpful.
Okay.
But I would say maybe we not have the discussion yet. We'll hear from
Yeah.
public commenters and
Yeah,
then.
I'm just trying to get questions and understanding. We'll actually do the deliberation after we've had public comment, and that's when we'll start formulating actual. So right now, we're just asking questions about the presentation. Thank you.
So can I just re-clarify? So we talked about the 110%, which I understand, but everything, when we're talking about zoning and setback requirements and everything else, all those things are still in play. This still assumes that whatever is proposed by the homeowner, that they're still remaining within, is it the actual current setbacks? Or are we talking about if they already have a setback that is non-conforming, they get to continue that non-conformance, or can you just clarify that? I just want,
Or we
I
get to
understand the
provide
110,
that guidance for you.
or you're not saying that tonight, I guess.
And like, yeah, also to be specific, like what would happen if the structure we talked about tonight, which was non-conforming, had burned down? Like, how would it have been rebuilt?
Those are all great questions. Let me unpack them one at a time. So, if you could restate your first question.
So my question is, will a homeowner who is presenting a set of development plans to the city, potentially under ministerial review, right, if we approve something, will the homeowner have to, will they have to conform to the existing zoning requirements in the code? Or if they have existing non-conforming exceptions going on, are they allowed to keep those?
So they are allowed to keep those, and this 110% rule would theoretically apply in that scenario for like in a non-conforming sense. But the second part of that is to say that it cannot further exacerbate, or the commission should consider whether or not it should further exacerbate those non-conforming or create new non-conforming conditions.
Right. Right.
So for example, if one wall happened to be within closer than it should be on the side setback, let's say, by creating this new structure that they're putting in, all of a sudden now that you have two areas where they're encroaching into the side
Right,
setback.
or a longer wall.
Maybe allow that one, it was already there, fine, but not another one, right? So something to that effect.
Right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's part of what we'll give guidance on when we deliberate.
Did that answer all your questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we go over the sequencing of this thing then? So a homeowner they want to come and talk to you. They sit down with you with, this is where my house was, but I want to do this now. And so there's that initial conversation that happens with the planning department, right? And you give them guidance. And so when they submit the plans, it's usually they need to submit, are they going to go straight to you with a plan set that is already ready for building and safety, or are they going to go through you first, get your blessing, and then they can start on their building safety plans with structure and everything?
I highly recommend everyone come and consult with me first.
Right.
They can come and submit right away. If they are privy to all of these guidelines, then they're fully within their right to do that.
No, I agree with you. That's the way it should be. Because you don't want to burn all your hours doing something that maybe you'll have to change again, right? So, okay, good.
Anything else on this?
Sorry, this is probably back to the very start of it, but question, we mentioned there's 14 houses. Is this limited to those 14 addresses?
No, this is not limited to those 14, because anyone this applies even to those homes that are that were subjected to the debris flow damages. So this isn't houses that just burnt down. This is houses that need to be reconstructed either because of fire
Because
or
the debris flow is a cause of the Eaton fire? Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So we still have houses that could be added, possibly. We don't know.
Interesting.
Yes, and I think this applies to not only red tagged but yellow tagged homes as well, because a yellow tagged home is not one that needs to be vacated completely, but a portion of it is unusable because of whatever damage. That portion needs to be fixed, and so it would apply to yellow tagged homes as well.
Okay, so they could just tear that down if they wanted to.
Right.
But if we didn't approve any of this, they could still do that through the county, correct?
No.
Okay.
No. That's why I wanted to split up these conversations. Don't confuse the debris removal process with this rebuild process. So in terms of tearing it down and hauling stuff away, yes, they can.
Right, so that's what I mean,
Yeah.
like a yellow flagged, if we got a house that was damaged next week when it rains, and it was, they meet the county criteria, they could go to the county to have it pulled down?
Let's see if our analyst Carlson knows the answer to that question. For yellow tags, could they tear down that structure and then have the county remove the debris?
And we're specifically talking about fire damage at this point?
Yes.
There is a little gray area. The Army Corps of Engineer will make a determination on the percentage of damage, whether they go in or not.
Okay.
It's a little case by case, and the county is doing their best to define so people will know, but it's still a moving process.
In some cases, when there's too much still standing up, they won't even want to go in there because it's, yeah.
Right.
They'll just push you to phase 2 and tell you.
But they could always come through us.
Right.
So even if, let's say they opt in, but then the county refuses to remove that debris, they could always go through us through this demolition permit process.
And if I heard you correctly, you said that there's three potential applicants who had partial, not full, that were, no?
Are they
That
full?
they've opted out.
They opted
They
out.
opted out of the county process. That's what I
Yeah,
meant.
there's two properties with one owner or full destruction. There was one property, another owner, it was a garage, so the structure was demolished, but you wouldn't call that a full single-family home that was lost.
Okay, okay.
Any further questions on the zoning before I move to the next topic?
So to get this special dispensation to go through this process, we're saying it has to be caused because of the Eden fire itself, or it's
Yes.
just a,
No, this is going to be limited to those property owners whose properties were damaged because of the Eaton fire or resulting debris flow.
got it, okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
So if a house burns down now because of a kitchen fire, then, okay.
No, doesn't apply to them.
Good.
Also, I should have mentioned this. The process we're gonna use for this is not your traditional ordinance process. We're going to recommend that the city council adopt an uncodified ordinance, meaning it's not going to change the municipal code published online. This ordinance will exist in the ether and will have an automatic expiration date, and I'll get to what that is. It's 3 years, but I'll talk about why. To encourage property owners to use it and to make sure that it's not used for any other purpose other than benefiting those property owners who are injured. Okay, so moving on to the next topic, still within the concept of entitlements. We haven't reached building yet, not post entitlements. We're still talking about the entitlement process. Under state law, and our zone and our municipal code reflects that state law, it says that ADUs cannot be built before the single family home. So ADU can't be built before the primary home, before the primary structure. You can build them simultaneously, or you can build the ADU after, but you can't build it before. This amendment that's being proposed would allow you to build the ADU first, so you can build something to live in while the primary structure is being built, assuming you don't have the capital or for whatever reason to build both at the same time.
Or time, it takes longer to build a
Or,
primary.
yeah, whatever the reason may be.
Did you recommend or are you soliciting feedback on whether or not you would have to have plans submitted for the primary residence?
Happy to receive those comments.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking that, or the 3-year. If they put it in for 3, is there any, what if they, put some preliminary thing in and just, I don't know, never build it? I don't
think
know
it's
who's gonna
addressed
do
here.
that, though.
Okay.
But, okay, yeah.
Any other questions on the ADU?
No objection to that, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Now this next one, permitting temporary storage of trailers, if we could scroll down. This is consistent with the governor's executive order. And so we're proposing amending our code for the R1, RC, and Hillside, which are the 3 zones that were impacted by the fires and debris flows, to allow for trailers to be used as living spaces in this interim period. So right now, you can't have a trailer and live in it on a vacant lot, for example, in any of these zones. And under this ordinance, with this amendment, you can. Interestingly, this one does have a provision where you have to have some kind of pending, I believe it has a requirement that you have to have some kind of pending application. So, just an interesting difference. Any questions on that before I move on?
No.
Okay,
That
yes,
also presumably expires after 3 years. so
correct.
You've been living in your trailer for 3 years, and
This
then
this
the
one is,
ordinance expires, and then you have to move out of your trailer.
this one is actually tied to the expiration of the executive order, which is also 3 years.
Yeah.
When it was adopted, so that's another reason why our ordinance is gonna be 3 years, to make sure that when all the executive orders expire, our ordinance also expires around the same time.
But if the trailer was 1,199 square feet, you could convert it as an ADU.
Right. Yes.
Only if it's an Airstream.
Doesn't matter. It could be a train car. I approved that project.
I approve that much.
Okay, moving on to waiving the cost of historic preservation. We're on page 7. Further up, further up. Further up. Keep going.
There we go. Oh,
No, I think, yeah, there you are. Okay, so the city is still interested in preserving its historical resources. I believe we have at least one property that we believe is of historic value. Friends?
Nature Friends is one we're wanting or interested in preserving some historic value. At this point, it could only be cultural value because that property had burned.
So this isn't so much this isn't so much a suspension. I mean, we are proposing suspending the portion of the code that talks about conducting the historical resources evaluations. But there's also an ask here of the city council, and the request is going to be, assuming the planning commission is on the same page, that instead of going applicant by applicant, home by home, that we task the current consultant we work with, who does because we sole source all historical resources evaluations, task that company to do a historic resource evaluation of all the properties that were impacted by the fire, present one report with recommendations to the council, as opposed to doing this piecemeal through individual applications that come in. Because currently the process is, we're not going to analyze the historical resource unless someone submits an application, and then as a result of that application, you receive a single report about a single home. So instead of doing that, we're proposing reviewing all the homes all at once. Now, this would be a cost borne by the city and not by the applicant. Questions?
Yeah, we know the age of homes. How many of the homes actually would even qualify outside of the Friends of Nature?
I haven't done a full count of that quite yet.
And it's definitely, that would be something that we include in the analysis. That when we in our
I think that's an easy decision point. If it's Friends of the Nature only, and we're only helping one organization, we may have a different opinion on that than if it's 12 of 14.
That's tough to name one, because like we were talking before, we might not know if we have flooding damage to a historic home next week. That's going to be part of this.
That would be something for the city council to
yeah, maybe we make a
deliberate on.
date if it was built after 1950 or something. I don't know.
Well, so there's a set date, right? It's based on number of years.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is if a home that exceeded that after the report had been generated, there would be a decision point for the city council as to whether or not they're going to extend that report to that home or not. Whereas we may give them guidance of the known ones today, let's do one historical report and let either give them a recommendation for it or punt it to them to decide.
Okay.
So there are completely destroyed homes, or not homes, just all structures that were completely destroyed. There were 13 that were would be subject to that discretionary demolition permit process, being homes that were originally constructed more than 75 years ago, and damaged structures, there are only 2.
So 15 of the total. Okay.
Any other questions about historic preservation before I move on to waiving certain public improvements?
So you've talked about waiving the cost, but there's no recommendations on rebuilding. Because I think the way the code is written today is that, and you'll know this better clearly, but if a historic house is destroyed for any reason, that you're supposed to rebuild it to the way it was under current code.
It can be rebuilt to the same development standards that applied to it under development code. And that's where we fall back to the 110% rule, that those development standards that applied to it within 110% range can still apply as a like-for-like change.
Okay, so I guess I remembered the code a little differently. I was under the impression that if something destroys a historically preserved home, or one that qualifies for that, that you have to rebuild to that same look and feel floor plan, but under today's building materials.
Building code requirements,
Yes.
yes, correct.
Okay.
Is that the case even when it's an involuntary destruction of the property?
Yes.
In our mind, when we were drafting this, we thought to ourselves, well, if this analysis is done early on and can provide us a recommendation that applies citywide, that recommendation can take into consideration some of these rebuild suggestions.
Yeah, and a non-codified code, a non-codified ordinance, thank you, can be amended as we
Yes.
go.
Yes.
So we could amend just that particular section once we had the results of the study.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, scrolling back down in the staff report, right there, actually, waiving certain public improvements as a condition of redevelopment. So as I learned from Public Works, when a project is entitled, obviously there are conditions of approval, and when we issue building permits, sometimes there are conditions of approval. In those conditions, we often try to encourage the building of sidewalks, if they don't have it, curb and gutter, if they don't have it. For purposes of this rebuild process, we're waiving those requirements because they're quite expensive. Staff estimates that sidewalks can cost upwards of $8,000 on average. The building official estimates that improvements to sidewalks cost about $20 per linear foot, and curb and gutter approximately $80 per linear foot, and that can add up to be quite a substantial number. So we're proposing waiving that for the rebuilds. If they didn't have it then, they don't have to have it now.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify. You're saying if they didn't have it, they don't have to do this. If it was there, they should replace it.
Right.
Okay.
And we can just see clarification here.
Yeah, part of the impetus of this is we would look at large projects and the heavy machinery that they would use to build. And all of a sudden, the curb, the sidewalk, the driveway has been considerably damaged during that process. We would make a requirement, when you're all done with your building, come and fix the public right-of-way. The other thing, so that's something to think about, but the other thing is we would find a development, and the house to the west of them and the house to the east of them have a sidewalk. And in front of this new development, there is no sidewalk. We would make them make the connection and have the sidewalk go all the way through. Considering the small number of houses and that, the effort here is to streamline and save costs, we think we could waive those recommendations for this.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Scrolling further down, actually staying right there, extending of the life of entitlements. Currently, under our municipal code, a zoning permit has a life of 1 year, meaning after it's been issued, that zoning permit is good for 1 year unless you extend it or you act upon it. And you act upon it by applying for a building permit. Similarly, a subdivision permit, so like a parcel map or a tentative parcel or a final map, those are good for, I think it's also 1 year or 2 years under our code?
2 years.
2 years under our code, and you're allowed a 2-year extension. We're proposing granting both existing, to the extent, we don't know that we have any of these. We haven't done the analysis yet, but we're mirroring some of the language we have in other, like in Pasadena and the county. So to the extent any of these properties have entitlements or subdivision, or so either zoning permits or subdivision permits that haven't been acted upon, we're giving them a 2-year extension to act upon those.
Okay.
Automatically. Any questions on that? Nope. All right, scrolling further down. Okay, now again, we're transitioning. We're moving from the entitlement process to the building process now. This is the last phase. Debris removal was first phase. Entitlements, zoning and subdivisions was the second phase. Now the last part of a development is always the building permit phase. The first recommendation is suspending the applicability of the low impact development ordinance. And again, we have senior analyst Carlson here. He can talk a little bit about what that is and what that means practically for the property owner, because he oversees that.
Thank you. Yeah, the low impact development ordinance, we call it LID often. It's a component of grading and drainage, and it is an onerous requirement. It's one of the longest time frames and the most expensive things that we require of new building. Now, this only applies in general terms to the addition of 500 square foot or more of new impervious surface. And what the requirement is to capture and retain the 85th percentile 24-hour storm. In real life in Sierra Madre, that's between 1.08 and 1.12 inches of rainfall over 24 hours. That has to be retained on site. A number of benefits for that is water conservation and water quality, the runoff and stuff like that. Again, with the relative low number of homes that this would apply to, in an effort to streamline and save money, we think it would be prudent to waive this requirement.
The potential cost savings estimated by staff, again, are significant. We have 20, so the staff report says applicant can expect to save $244 on the staff review time, but approximately $6,000 on hiring a civil engineer to develop the plans, and approximately $25,000 on the actual improvements.
Minimum.
So we're talking about a minimum $30,000 plus cost savings to the applicant.
Okay.
Questions?
Has any thought been put in? So estimating savings for applicant. Again, we have 14 applicants, or possibly up to 14, or I guess there could be more. So,
All damaged properties will need to go through this process.
right. So we're basically removing. I like the idea. I'm just nervous of. This might be more for discussion, but is the thought process of removing something that insurance was going to pay for because it was a code requirement. So if insurance was going to put back this system, because in order to build that house back the way it was, they'd have to follow that. They have to add sprinklers. They have to do these certain things that are required by code. And your insurance, some property insurance does have that coverage, but it only would apply if it is necessary. So my only concern would be removing something that was going to be necessary because if it's not necessary and the adjuster knows that, then it's no longer part of the rebuild of that house. So that's just my thought process
Like
on that, if we've really thought about that.
If the homeowner wanted it, are you saying?
So if we say we remove this and then the homeowner says, well, I want these lid things to put back into my house. I want to save the water and everything like that. That would likely remove it from anything the insurance company could pay for because it's not a code.
Just to kind of let you know, this part adds a lot of time.
I believe it, and I'm here. My big thing here is time, honestly.
Yeah.
Is to get these things started and going because
It's really, really arduous, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not against it. I am just saying we should be careful.
Maybe people can opt in if they want, but
Yeah, but then they're paying for it, not their insurance company.
Well, I mean, there's going to be
Most
plenty
likely.
of other things that insurance is going to have to pay for code upgrades. I mean,
Right, and sprinklers and all that kind of stuff.
There's
Yeah.
going to be water meters you're going to have to change out to size up for that. There's going to be
Right.
solar panels you're going to have to put in if they didn't have it. You know, I mean, there's going to be.
Well, maybe. I don't know. We haven't finished.
We're coming to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have something?
I was just going to let Commissioner Simcock know that part of the thought process on this was that we believe, and we haven't looked at every single one, but every one of these structures was built before the lid ordinance applied.
Right.
Also, Sierra Madre is known as having amongst the most strict lid ordinances in Southern California. So I'm not sure what insurance would say anyhow.
Right, okay.
Next up, we have streamlining the approval of building plans. Scroll down. This is consistent with the governor's executive order. Planner Wolf, did you want to just quickly mention what the idea is here?
So I believe this is under the governor order to extend the approval of building plans that were approved in the code cycle applicable for 2019 and 2022 code. We're coming up on a new cycle. On January 1st, there will be a 2025 building code cycle. So this order allows residents who have building plans that were designed under the 2019 codes and later to continue to use those in their reconstruction.
And I don't know that we have any, but we're including it because the governor's executive order included it, and we want to have one ordinance that encompasses everything.
Okay.
All the relevant rules.
And candidly, we don't know
We don't know yet. It's not over.
what will be affected by this yet.
Right.
Right. Yep. Next, extending the life of building permits. So just like zoning permits and subdivision permits, building permits also have a useful life, and they expire 1 year after issuance, and then you comply every 6 months for a renewal. We're proposing extending it for a 3-year period. Or, sorry, was it a?
Says 3 years.
3 years, correct, yeah, 3 years. And again, that just gives the property owner more time to do, to construct the property, the structures. Next, avoiding the cost of geological and soil reports. This is again something handled by our senior analyst, so if James wouldn't mind commenting on this one.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the key here is that we want to keep it discretionary. The code says the city engineer may require these studies. We hope to find opportunities where these studies can be waived, but I know in a number of situations they won't be. So, in fact, there are a couple of properties that are in liquefaction zones, so those reports are going to be necessary for the rebuild in those areas. The key is that the city engineer will maintain the discretionary and be able to waive it as much as possible.
As much as possible is the key. Where
Yeah.
the engineer is encouraged to waive it based on the preponderance of evidence, if they can conclude that it's not necessary to waive this requirement, save the applicant money and time.
Yeah.
Streamlining administrative review. So, to give you an example, the city of Pasadena, and the county being big cities as they are, they have special staff in-house that they're going to dedicate to servicing all these rebuild applications. We don't have those same resources here. So we're proposing, if the planning commission is amenable and the city council is amenable to it, amending our existing contract with our third-party consultants, Wildan Engineering, for them to take over all aspects of this with respect to building permits. Planning will still be done in-house, but the building permit portion is going to be taken out of the Public Works Department and going to be handled in its entirety by Wildan. Wildan already handles the engineering portion. They already handle the fire check portion. They're going to handle all other engineering and the public works aspects of these development permits. And we expect that it's going to move faster because, again, we only have so many public works staff, and they already have projects on their desk. Researching fire hydrant flows. This is something I learned in the process of working on the staff report. We need fire hydrant flow analysis for all of these developments that are going to be rebuilt. We don't have the in-house person anymore that does this. Wildan Engineering who's our fire marshal and our fire code official, also doesn't do this. So the fire chief is going to reach out to, and we have our city engineer here, our building official here as well. So if you have any questions about the building process, you can ask him. But with respect to the fire hydrant flow analysis, we're going to reach out to either the cities of Pasadena and Arcadia to see if they can provide us staff that can do this analysis, or in the alternative, we're going to go with another private third-party consultant that can do this for us. But the idea is to do this now, ahead of time, for these homes, because we already know that we need it.
Right.
And then the last one, approving alternative materials, designs, and construction methods. The fire code official already has this authority. A lot of applicants don't know that this authority exists. And so we're just going to clarify to applicants that if for whatever reason, because there's going to be a lot of people trying to rebuild at the same time, if we find that there's some kind of shortage of materials or supplies that are commonly used and pre-approved, we will consider alternative materials, designs, and construction methods that are, it says here, equally, I believe, durable and safe and effective, that can serve as a substitute to help speed along the process so that they don't have to wait for whatever materials to arrive. And that concludes the staff report and the recommendations. Chair, I turn it back to you.
Any questions for staff before we take public comment?
So in our contracts with Wilden, are we gonna stipulate what turnaround times we're expecting and all those things?
Wilden Engineering has committed to a 10 business day turnaround time for all applications.
First or second or whatever, plan check, whatever. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions for staff?
Was there more that we considered doing that you didn't end up recommending in the end?
I believe there was some consideration to extending the life of an entitlement to all entitlements that are currently pending their execution. Some other cities have done that as a more permissive method. Those other cities that are doing that are doing so because they feel, or they are impacted more than Sierra Madre is in terms of what they have to rebuild. We feel that what we have here is manageable with the staff we have and the help we have from Wilden, so we don't feel that we need to extend the life of all entitlements this way, that we can still manage what we have in-house.
And in terms of where we stand with the other 8 public agencies, we're about 1 week behind the city of Pasadena, which is exactly where I want to be, because then I can see all their staff reports and ordinances and use those as a model to help instruct what I present to the commission here. And we're also about, I think, a week or 2 weeks behind what the county is doing. So we're all doing this around the same time, and we're all sharing I'm in touch with the city attorney and the county public counsel, so we're sharing this information. So whatever this body does today is going to be shared with the city of Pasadena and the county of LA.
Okay, thank you. Questions of staff? Going once, twice. At this time, anybody who has community input on this agendized item may address the Planning Commission. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record, and we'll show some leniency on the timing.
What about cesspools that exist?
Could you come to the mic?
What about existing cesspools that are with the houses now?
Name and address.
So the question is whether existing cesspools may continue to be used, is that correct?
Right. On total houses, they're totally burned.
Would you like us to answer questions?
I would like. It's something, so we're not supposed to take questions directly from, but no, it's great. We will make sure that we mention it as we do our deliberation.
Okay, so you're saying on a historical house that we'd have to rebuild it the same way?
I'm saying that the code, which we're trying to get around, requires something like that. What we will deliberate on is what we would do instead of what the code specifically calls out.
Well, what would you think on 800 Carter? I guess I'm not supposed to ask the question though, right?
Yeah, we can't
But,
answer direct questions.
That's a historical house, but we don't want to build it back the way it was.
We will discuss that as part of our deliberation.
Okay.
And we're making decisions for the entirety of this, not just for individual
But
locations.
you said it wouldn't have to go through the historical review, right? So,
We're going to talk about that and deliberate. So it's premature for me to tell you what our decision is before we've talked about what our decision would be.
okay. How can one have input on the water saving thing?
This is your time to say whatever you'd like, and we're here to listen. So this is the perfect time for you to give us feedback.
Don't like them. The saving of the water thing is not good.
All
So
right.
I'd like to keep it the way they recommended, that we don't have to do it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Alex Jimenez. My property is at 435 Auburn Lane. I started the entitlement process on my property about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago. Been working with Josh on getting it approved. Did everything by right, no incentives, no CUP, no variance or anything like that. But I was impacted by the fires. My garage burnt down, and I've already paid for the permits, and I'm just wondering how that would be treated. As far as I've already paid, it's already been approved according to the municipal code. But do I also get those incentives now? Maybe refund on some of the fees that I've already paid. And also, I do have that water preservation component to my plans, and it would save me a lot of money on that part of it. And I just see if you guys can take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a public comment? All right, then I guess we'll bring it back for deliberation. Absolutely. We'll take a 10-minute recess and be back here at 7:33.
think the cutoff is still 11 p.m. for planning commission meetings. So
11 p.m. Okay. We didn't adjust that, did we?
Do you wanna test
We're
the
gonna
water?
need that though. Let's not adjust it till after we're done with Stonehouse.
Test the water?
We're not adjusting.
So that was the old, and then when we moved the start time earlier.
Yeah.
Oh,
We never adjusted the.
that's funny.
Yeah.
I'd
Not
call
funny.
Josh if I were you. I would call Josh because he's up there. Oh, you could just.
Yes.
Josh.
Let me make it too fancy. Oh, I should have talked.
Do we need to let?
There we go.
Oh, there we go. All right, we will reconvene the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, March 6th, 2025. We've brought it back for deliberation, and so if I might recommend that we just kind of start flipping pages on the staff report so that we can address them just one at a time. Does that work for everybody? All right. Demolition permits, did anybody have any questions or concerns about the demolition permit part of it? And Mr. City Attorney, were you seeking any guidance on any of the demolition permit portion?
No, Chair.
Okay. Next is the subdivision and zoning permits, waiving of the discretionary review. Did anybody have any questions or concerns with this? This is the
Are we into the
10%. Yeah, this is the 10% one. So this probably warrants some conversation.
Yeah, at least talk about it. I mean,
Yeah. You want to start?
sure. I mean, I think that I don't know. I guess I kind of stick the whole thing here in one spot. But if you're, to me, if you're trying to, if your home was destroyed and you're trying to put back basically what was there, I'd love to streamline at least the timeline as much as we can. If that means saving money too, that's great. But getting a jump on this and getting people back in their houses and getting the houses back built, and everybody, I think, is pretty important to me. If you would like to build something different and very different, I don't think you're as concerned about getting back in that quick timeline. I'm not taking advantage, but you're doing something different, and you're building something else, and I think we definitely need to look at that. So if we're going to use this 10%, I think I'm not really hugely hip on the 250 square feet because that's 25% at my house, but which is kind of not like for like. But it doesn't bother me. We can use the wording, especially if that's what other people are using as a wording. So.
I'm supportive of the 110% requirement, either 10% of the, as I understand, 10% of the existing or 250, whichever would be acceptable there, right? I would suggest, I think in the proposal here, in the recommendation, in the proposal to the commission should consider the following: whether to permit an additional 10% variance to those non-conforming conditions. And I would not like us to extend the non-conforming condition, though, in the recommendation that we have here.
Right.
I would, so supportive of the 110% option, but not to extend an existing non-conforming condition.
Yeah,
So
If it's existing, then you can keep it, but not, as I understand this, you're not making that non-conformance greater.
So if I could nuance that a little, because I think our code currently allows for you to continue walls on the same plane that are non-conforming. So technically you're creating a greater non-conformance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd want to mirror that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so long as you don't create a secondary
Yeah.
non-conformance.
Yes.
Is that
That's a much better
Or
representation of
or
what I'm
greater non-conformance. So if we were at
Well, but greater
11
would be-
feet, then we can't go to 8 feet, distance. Like if we were just looking
Right.
at the place tonight,
Right.
we got
Yeah.
the porch at 11 feet. We can't build a new porch to 8 feet.
Right, so I guess, like, what I'm indicating is, if the setback was 10 feet and the existing non-conforming house was 7 feet, that wall was 15 feet long. If your new house wall is 20 feet long on that same plane, I think I'm fine with that. But if you can't extend it, you can't increase the non-conformance so that you're closer to the setback. But if you extend that plane, I think our code allows for that today, so I don't have a problem with that as part of it. Do you understand what we're saying?
So yes, if I may clarify that, there is a provision in, I think the R1 and RC codes, which require an administrative design review permit for additions that align with an existing non-conforming setback, a side yard setback at the ground floor only. Administrative design review is for additions less than 50% the existing area, and then design review permits are for those that are greater than 50% the area. Is the commission wanting to suspend the requirement for a design review permit and permit such an addition that aligns anyway?
I think that's what that's what I'm recommending.
And Planner Wolf, maybe you can explain the difference between an administrative design review permit and what would take place in the absence of an administrative design review permit, because they're both being handled at the staff level.
So administrative design review permit it's just a staff level discretionary review of the design, which we make findings for based on architectural quality of the project. For additions, that's particularly important that the addition meet the same design standards as the existing, or that the existing be modified in such a way to make one comprehensive architecturally designed project. Administrative design review permits range in fees, I think, about $5,000 to $6,000, whereas a full design review permit is about $8,000. Now, a full design review permit is currently default a staff level review, but can be deferred to the planning commission at the sole discretion of the director.
And just to put more clarity on that, when we're doing an administrative design review permit, staff is basically sitting as the planning commission and making those same findings and evaluating projects and suggesting differences. But when we're not doing design review, it's really just plan checking. We're checking off boxes, making sure that development standards are met, and that's about it. Did I capture that accurately?
That's correct, and to the extent we can make suggestions on design, it is not enforceable.
In the absence of administrative design review.
So then so if I'm hearing what you're saying, if we waive completely design review, how would we actually enforce when something is non-conforming?
They're still enforcing the development standards.
Okay.
But they're not looking at the design of the project.
Right.
So, and that's taken into account aesthetics and other aspects that the planning commission considers. Color, all that.
Okay, so then let me say this back to you and make sure I understand this. So if we were to waive design review and said that we are okay with returning to the same level of existing nonconformances, but not creating other than planes of walls as dictated in the code today, greater variances or greater nonconformances, then that would get caught even though there's not a design review happening. Yes?
So if I understand that correctly, that means that if someone was building at 110% the development standards that were there, by extending the first floor out to create an addition to the pre-existing that was non-conforming with a side yard setback, that would be something the commission wants permitted without a design review permit.
I believe so.
Can you repeat the last
yes,
portion?
say that last.
So
yeah.
Can you say the very last portion of what you said?
So where there would be an addition to a pre-existing home that aligns with a side yard setback at the ground floor that is non-conforming with the existing required code, that addition, along with all of the reconstruction, would be permitted as a like-for-like replacement.
Yes.
And the nonconformity is on the same plane as you suggested. It's not going beyond that.
Correct. It's not
Correct.
worse. It's just aligned with.
Yes, okay.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that is what we're looking for.
And by addition, you mean additional links, not like an addition.
Additional expansion of
Yeah, okay,
pre-existing.
okay.
Yes.
Which will make, okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh,
One thing I would like to do, though, is to continue to have that anytime the agency, that staff wants to refer it, that they have the ability to.
Understood.
We have other parts of zoning code which require a design review that aren't listed specifically in section 1720.027. Another one I can think of is reducing the prevailing front yard setback down to the minimum of 25 feet. Is that something that the commission would also be amenable to waiving?
Reducing the setback down, so you're saying that if there's a prevailing setback of 27 feet, it takes a design review to move it down to 25?
That's correct.
Prevailing means existing.
Prevailing front yard setback means it is conforming with the average of front yards on that block.
Okay.
It is such fun when we get those. So if there's 7 houses, you take the average setback, and that's considered the prevailing, and you're not allowed to infringe in it, even though 25 is the code if there's not a prevailing, right?
Thank you.
So, yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
No,
Yeah,
it's
that
fine.
sounds
Yes.
logical.
And that's provided that that movement is
Still
more than 110%.
No more than 110%. And one of the things that was brought up was, so I wanted to propose this as well. Because we're saying that you can't create nonconformances. Likewise, if that you cannot exceed whatever your lot coverage is as part of this. In other words, if you're already, if you're at 4,000 square feet and 10% would be 4,400, but 4,200 is the limit that you're allowed on that lot, you should only get the greater of the maximum allowable, 10%, or 250.
Do you mean the lesser of?
No, the lesser of.
Sorry.
Well,
nothing
greater
more-
of,
sorry.
up to a cap, I guess.
Up to the allowable,
Yeah.
the greater of either of those. Yeah,
So 110% provided that it does not create a nonconformance.
correct. Or need a variance.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other guidance you were looking for on that section?
Does the commission want to allow that extra 10% to create a new second story? Or
I like the
re-
way.
I do not.
I like the way it was written, that
Yeah.
if you have a second story, you can put the extra 10% up there, but if you don't have a second story, the 10% can't be used to create that.
Understood.
I honestly don't mind if someone's home burnt down if they want to make a second story.
Just to clarify that.
Oh, they can.
Yeah,
In the
They
residential.
just don't qualify for this.
for they'd have to then.
They're building a different type of house.
Okay, but I mean, qualifying for this, I wouldn't mind if they wanted to create a second story personally, but.
From what you've read, that's different than what the Pasadena County are doing, right? Or do they?
On that point, I'm not sure actually.
I don't think that they've
they're
addressed it.
differentiating. They're saying whatever square footage you had, as long as you can make it 1 story, 2 story, whatever.
Yeah,
they
you
don't
do
care,
what
right?
you want with your square footage.
So when we're looking at the 110% rule, we're applying that to the number of stories. So there's no such thing as a 10% of a story. It doesn't create a full story. So it would not, in its strictest interpretation, allow for a second story addition unless that's what the commission wants to allow. But I also want to clarify that it is permitted by right to construct a new 2-story home in the residential canyon zone.
Mhm.
So someone could do that, a new project that's not like for like, but still be permitted by right.
Okay, so then let's make that exclusive of the canyon zone, since that's already allowed. I forgot about that in the canyon zone. Thank you for pointing that out. I would say exclusive of the canyon zone. My preference is that
Right.
you don't add a second story. Any other curious codes that we should solve for?
I just want to make sure that wherever there is design review mentioned outside of what was mentioned in the staff report, that that is something that the commission would like or want to intend to be waived.
Yeah, I assume that we are here tonight to get guidance, and that when you come back with the actual text, that you will have done the search to find all of those other ones, and they'll be referenced in the proposal. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
Okay. And in the presentation for that, let's make sure that we call out where if there are places that we haven't, that we've mentioned tonight, that we think are important, that were design review, that we haven't contemplated here tonight. That'd be great.
Okay, will do.
Anything else on this section? All right. ADUs built before the primary residence.
Sounds like a great,
Sounds good.
to me.
I would like to allow it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we asked the questions earlier, we asked whether or not you should have to have the permit for the primary residence on file, or if, because hypothetically, you could just not build that, and now the ADU would be your primary residence.
Could you just do that? You could do that anyway, right? I mean, realistically?
No, the code today, that's what we're varying. The code today says you have to start them together.
Right.
Or ADU afterwards, so that you have your primary residence.
And for the record, ADUs have more permissive development standards than a single-family
Right.
home primary residence.
Right. Setbacks are almost nothing. Yeah, 4 feet.
Do any of these houses so far have an ADU? Or are we talking a new ADU?
There are 3 existing ADUs that have been burned down.
Okay.
Wow.
But I would be fine with allowing a new ADU, so if you can get that up in 6 months, you're living back on your property, and then you start building your own house.
Okay,
I would
but
like
are
to
you
s-
okay with the ADU that gets built first becoming the primary residence? Because here's the challenge with that. And I'm not advocating for one way or the other, but we create a legal catch-22. If we convert it to the primary residence, because it's the only residence on that property, it no longer is eligible to be 4 feet from the property line, which as an ADU it can be, right? So we would be creating some number of non-conforming,
Right.
which is okay. We can also say that this is something that's worth accepting.
The most flexibility we can allow somebody to get in as soon as we can.
Mhm.
That's the way we should shoot it, because it's gonna be an expiring kind of.
They're gonna have to have some kind of at least preliminary, or maybe, no.
Well, it's up to us to
I don't-
it's up to us to make that decision.
Yeah, to get them in as quickly as possible. And like worst case scenario, there's like 14 properties, like maybe one of them
14 today.
14 today, but
Right.
I hope no more, but maybe one of them tries an odd loophole, but I think to me, like that's a risk that I would rather just like make it not onerous as soon as these people can get back on, just like get them back on.
Right.
City attorney?
So I want to draw a comparison here for purposes of this conversation. In the next section that talks about permitting temporary storage of trailers, it says that you can have a trailer on a lot, but only while a building permit for the construction of such residence is in full force and effect, and in no event longer than 6 months, which we struck. But the key line I wanted to highlight there is, but only while a building permit for the construction of such residence is in full force and effect. And I think what you're saying, Chair Dennison, is that they can proceed with an ADU, but only while an application for a primary residence is in full force and effect. Something to that effect? Something like that? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think just.
I'm saying that's an option for us to consider, but honestly, the logistics, it could be that they only have the time to focus on one property and they need to get home again. So I'm inclined to just live with it. if everybody else is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then once they're in their ADU or whatever, then they're like, oh, let's think about the big structure, and that's this whole.
But,
other
but
nightmare.
even if it becomes a primary residence, we're talking a very small number
Yeah.
of existing non-conforming
And I
houses.
think most people with the insurance especially are gonna wanna rebuild the entire thing, for home value and other things.
So then the sequence of this, would it look like you maybe plan out an ADU and you get it into the city, get it approved, then you start building. And now that you've started the process of having some kind of permitting sequence of something, you could put a trailer there so you could start being there while you're constructing the ADU. Is that kind of what we're saying with the trailer?
If we're switching topics to the trailer now?
Yes,
sorry,
so
yeah, let me finish
the
that the other
trailer is
one.
the
Finish
next,
that
the trailer is the
Yeah.
next one.
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
that-
right now, we're like, I guess we're thinking the ADU while you're building the main house,
I'm
and
good
then
with
the
that.
next one is maybe like the trailer while you're building the ADU, you know?
Okay, so from an ADU perspective, we're fine with doing that first and no requirements, except that,
This isn't mentioned in the staff report, but this is something I just thought of. State law allows certain ADUs, and these are commonly referred to as exempt ADUs, and those are typically those that are no more than 800 square foot, despite the fact that 1,200 square feet is the max, but 800 square feet is allowed regardless of the conformance with lot coverage, square footage, and so on, and setbacks. Does the commission want to limit the ADUs to those that are exempt by state law, to then allow to the maximum development of the primary dwelling unit if the homeowner so chooses?
Because otherwise, your standard limit for an ADU is 1,200 square feet. But if you're gonna go with the smaller standard that state law allows, that basically waives all our requirements, it's 800 square feet. Is the height the same?
Height is 16 feet in any case,
Both?
yes.
but it's only an ADU up to 1,200 square feet, right?
So if a ADU is constructed at 1,200 square feet, that is then part of the lot coverage and floor area requirement, meaning that if, for example, the maximum allowed on a lot is 4,000 square feet, that if a 1,200 square foot ADU is built, only 2,800 square feet is remaining for the rest of the development. But
Yeah.
in a case where there is a 4,000 square foot home existing, someone can add an 800 square foot home by state law, or ADU, 800 square foot ADU by state law.
Right, right, so,
It's cart before the horse, that's what we're talking about
Right.
here. Whether to limit the ADUs that are built before the primary dwelling units to those that are exempt by state law to sustain the maximum allowable that could be permitted on that lot.
I love my family and don't want to spend my life with them in 800 square feet. So I don't think I want to limit it to, yeah, maximum flexibility. So,
Okay.
and that's just a choice that should be made clear to them by staff.
Yes.
That if you exceed, as soon as you hit 800,
Yeah,
it's
as
now
long
going
as-
to count against your
Yeah,
coverage.
but it's disclosed. We don't want it to
Yeah,
surprise
disclose it.
them,
Well,
you
yes,
know.
of course.
I don't, it's disclosed because it's your job to know the law,
Yeah, yeah.
but we should go out of our way to try to make that
Yeah.
clear.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Trailers. So, Mr. City Attorney, is the way that this is being proposed for primary residence, ADU, or any kind of building permit?
Any kind of building permit. And basically, a trailer can now be used as a living area on a lot
And so.
for 3 years.
That's what I was gonna ask. So, because I always like to figure out like what happens if nothing happens. And after 3 years, the permit would expire. Even if they don't finish the ADU, the permit would expire and the trailer would have to be removed.
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing that was in there was the building permit for the ADU. I'm imagining now the sequencing might be, you know, you're wanting to live in a trailer and then either the ADU or the main house. The ADU if you're building both an ADU and a main house, and the main house if you're just building a main house. But how long does it take to get that requirement met for a building permit?
Well, so we would be waiving the entire section, so we wouldn't have this need for them to have an active building permit
Okay,
anymore.
got it. That's fine. I thought you mentioned something about that, but understood.
Okay, so then if they're not, if the homeowner is not contemplating at that time building, they can put a trailer on there,
Right,
but that expires 3 years.
right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Waiving the cost of historic preservation. So
I'm sorry, there's just one more other thing I need to add. And actually, this was a question for maybe analyst Carlson or maybe even our building official. When a trailer is set up on a vacant lot, I assume they need to connect to utilities. And so they're still gonna need to get some kind of building permit, I believe. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But those are like, I don't want to venture, because I haven't done construction in 30 years now, but they used to be like temp power was like $150 permit or something. I'm sure it's significantly more than that, but it's de minimis.
Temp power now, I think, is $280.
Okay. I was in.
That's not the expensive part, though.
I was in the pocket, right? Yeah. Paying United to drop the pole is the expensive part, right? But yeah, okay. Waiving the cost of historic preservation. I think fundamentally, nobody had an objection to waiving the cost. It was making a recommendation to the council as to whether or not we wanted to do a resource report for all existing damaged buildings at this time. And it sounded like the number of existing buildings that would need this report was 80% or greater. You said it was 13.
Yes, but as we continue to experience more potential damage from mud flows, at what point do we want to set that time to do that?
Right, and that was thank you, that's exactly where I was headed, is that the next part of it is we have 3 options. We can make a recommendation for how long we would want them to now do a report when there is damage. We can not make a recommendation, or we can recommend that the city council take it up.
And one thing I'd like to add too is whether this requirement for historic review can be deferred so that the applicant can continue their construction. Being that the property is already burned to the ground, there's only records to look for. There's no site observation required. It's a burned and damaged property.
Right. One's not contingent on another, right? It's just parallel tracks, yeah.
Could I clarify what these reports are used for, given that the structure burned to the ground?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Traditionally and in general sense, the reports are used to find architectural significance. Obviously, that doesn't apply to those that are burned down all the way. But they also find cultural significance. For example, one of our homes was found to be the home of the first mayor of Sierra Madre, and so for that it was found to be historically significant. It's, I think in that case, when a project came forward, we asked the applicant as a condition of their approval to place a plaque on the building that commemorates the history.
Okay, so it has something to do with acknowledging the history of the property, potentially.
Yes.
And the report should include, if the planning commission decides to go forward with the recommendation for a report like this to be done, the report will include recommendations on how to capture that historical significance and how to make sure it's, like, to recommend the installation of a plaque, for example.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of hassle for a plaque. Like, I'm wondering, could we just like waive all of this? Like, do we need to, or do we specifically want, like, not to call out specific properties, but there's obviously like one in the canyon and some others where, is there something that we're trying to get out of this? It seems to me like maybe we could just
Yeah, nature
waive
fence,
this.
I think. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about,
But
right?
I mean,
Right
like-
now.
Well, so there can be more than that. Many of these can be part of the Mills Act, right?
Could be.
I mean, like, it
So-
burned to the ground.
So, yes, so they probably shouldn't qualify for the Mills Act
Yeah.
anymore, right? Like, but that's not the way the Mills Act is written, right? So we would have to figure that out. I don't know what, the way that, I haven't reviewed the contract, but maybe that's some guidance you can bring us back to the next one, is what happens in the event of loss of a Mills Act home.
There's also, I mean, relevance to just create a historical sort of data point of, we've collected all this information and just, you know.
I agree. I just feel like we're talking a lot about it, and maybe this whole report will cost, I don't know, $5,000
Yeah,
and
how
weeks
much
to
do you think
compile and.
like this would-
So, thank you, Commission. We haven't consulted with Sapos Environmental on how much this would cost for comprehensive report yet, but we're likely able to negotiate something lower than $1,530 per property. When we discussed this internally with staff, we were contemplating this because, yes, we wanted to streamline this as much as possible, but this is going to be our only opportunity to do some kind of historic analysis of these properties, because once they're built, they're not likely to be altered within the next 30 to 50 years.
So I don't think it's so much for the new house that's going in there, but it's just for future, when people want to look at, oh, it's historically, this house used to be there kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, it's like quite a lot of money for not that much effort, and I feel like for Nature Friends specifically, if they're interested in that, they could commission their own report for $1,500.
Yeah, so I think the contemplation was that the city would pay for it, not that the applicant would.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's, rather than the city paying, I don't know, like $15,000 or whatever for 14 reports, what if we just gave Nature Friends like a donation for $1,500? I don't know. We are applying something that makes a lot of sense 99% of the time and trying to figure out how to balance that, right? So the way that a town of this age keeps its historical record is by doing historical bookkeeping like this. And so are we willing to forego any kind of historical bookkeeping on this group and whatever group follows, to the point of these can all be deferred, so they're not of a time consequence. So, and maybe that's the decision that we make, is that this is, the city council in their infinite wisdom should make these decisions.
Right.
But I guess, do you think Sapos could give us some kind of, well, the dollars and cents go to the city council, but it sounds like we should all consider.
We should get a price.
No, I think Chair raises a good point here. Budgetary decisions are within the city council's purview.
Right.
I think what we're asking from this body is, do you see value in this?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I see value.
And I do. This is our historical record of the city, and so I personally see value, but I'm open to the conversation. I mean, it sounds like what we would do is make a recommendation that we should do this or shouldn't do it. And then I think we've already made the recommendation that it can be deferred. It doesn't, from a timing perspective, it doesn't have any effect on the streamlining of the process. And then city council can decide if they think that there's dollar value in the budget to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have the luxury to potentially, because the number of homes is so small, which we're very thankful for. But I'm considering, future events, earthquakes, fires, whatever that might affect our city. And imagine we had hundreds or thousands of properties. Like, this would not be logical to do for all those. But we do have, in this case, I think, the luxury to potentially, go either way on it. Ultimately, I find moving forward more valuable than looking into the past, but it's so small in number.
Or we could just not waive it. I mean,
No,
And
I'd
then-
rather waive
that-
it. and
I'd
not-
rather waive it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'd rather waive it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that as well. I think that we have that luxury because it's a small number, but should it increase, it would be quite a lot, and most properties will not need it, I don't think.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is everybody's in favor of waiving,
Yes.
and we can revisit next week, or at our next meeting, how we feel about recommending to city council to do it or not.
If the commission wishes, I can consult with Sapos and discuss what fees we could be looking at.
Budgetary is out of our purview. We don't look at the inside of houses,
Yeah.
and we don't look at the budget dollars, so.
That does make sense.
And again, there's obviously going to be a screening based on the age of the home anyway, right? So it's not like they're doing like.
It's 75.
Yeah, they're
75.
gonna do that screen, and anything
It's what
that's newer than that is
yeah,
out, and
it's
anything that's older than that is in.
18 houses right now or something, I think.
Right.
Okay.
So I mean, it sounds like what we're saying is the city council should decide if they see the value in it.
And I'll have that discussion anyway for city council's benefit.
Perfect, thank you. Waiving certain public improvements as a condition of redevelopment, so this is sidewalks. And I think, if I recall correctly, when we had the conversation earlier, it was if you had a sidewalk, build your sidewalk back. If you don't have a sidewalk, we're not gonna require you to upgrade to one. Is that?
That's what it sounded
everybody's-
like to me.
Is that what everybody's?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay.
And if you did have a sidewalk, yeah, but the sidewalk's probably not damaged from the fire, but if you when you build the house back and you've got a tractor running over the sidewalk every day, it's gonna destroy the sidewalk, so to replace
Yeah,
the sidewalk.
if it does destroy
Right,
it,
right.
to the extent that it does, right?
Right.
Yeah. Any questions on that?
Just a question actually for Analyst Carlson. In your report to the commission, you had said something about postponing the condition for an individual to repair a sidewalk if it's been damaged.
I don't recall a postponing or anything, but that's something I want the commission to consider. If part of the public right-of-way does get severely damaged, and it's not from the fire during the rebuild, are we willing to just waive that requirement?
So meaning they would not fix the sidewalk if they damage it as a part of the construction process.
I don't know how you could carve that out. I think it's either we waive it or we don't, or if we don't waive it, we still have some discretion. If it is a case where their tractor destroys a sidewalk, do we still have the authority to make them do it? Or is that just a public improvement that the city takes on?
But that gets into liability issues too, though, doesn't it?
Right, no, somebody trips on it.
Yeah.
I think we should just return it to the state it was before the fire. That's my thought.
That's good, Commissioner, you too, because there is other avenues. If they create a hazardous situation, we can go at them, in that approach.
Yeah, because I think I don't know how we would enforce it that delayed, right? Like, are you gonna hold the C of O until you get their sidewalks back? Like,
Yeah,
I don't think that there's a practical way for enforcement if I'm thinking about that, right?
Yeah, in Public Works, we would reserve the requirement to do the public improvement upon approval of plans. So we're kind of guessing, if they're going to damage it or not. Now, if it's a gap in the sidewalk, we already know we want them to fill in that gap. But by waiving it and keeping it really clean, we can go back and say, hey, you created a dangerous situation on that curb or that sidewalk. Regardless of the waiver, you've created a hazardous situation, and we could take that approach.
Okay. But to be clear, when you say waiver, you mean?
Waive the requirement to do public improvement associated with the rebuilding of the property.
Okay, and I think what we were talking about was only waiving it in the event that it didn't have one already.
Right.
In other words, if you have a total loss and you had a sidewalk there, we don't want the sidewalk to go away and be the only one on all of Highland that doesn't have a sidewalk, right?
Sure,
So I think that's what we're thinking about is return it to the existing state.
Sure.
If you had a sidewalk before, return it. But otherwise, it would be waived, right? Am I?
That's what I said.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
100%.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions about? Okay. LID, Low Impact Development Ordinance.
Well, I think we're on extending
Oh,
the life of
extending.
it.
Oh, I was trying to hop over that one, sorry. Extending the life of entitlements. So this extends it to 3 years, consistent with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got no problem with that. I don't know.
Sorry, it's a 2-year renewal.
2 years.
Yeah, a 2-year extension on top of the 1-year life.
And the reason we chose 2 years is because the Subdivision Map Act limits us to 2 years maximum, so we're just gonna give them 2 years.
Makes sense.
So we're giving them 3 years to build back. Are you saying that after 2 years, they're gonna have to reapply?
After 2 years, they're gonna have to reapply. So if it's set to expire in a year, then they're gonna have an additional 2 years, and in 3 years they have
Okay,
to apply.
okay, so
Yeah.
for 3 years, okay. 3 total, I was just making sure that it's 3 total. Okay, thank you. Now we get to everybody's favorite of lid.
Oh, yeah.
So suspending lid, if you, I guess there were, oh, we don't think any of them already had lid, right? Lid is recent enough that none of them had it. Okay.
Then
So
same, just keep it the same.
just waive it?
Waive it, yeah.
Yes.
Just waive all lid requirements? Okay.
But to be clear, lid is a good thing, but for this case, we're.
Lid is a very important thing. If you want water to come out those
Right.
hydrants, you need to trap the
Right,
water.
but we're not waiving fire sprinklers or things like that, correct?
I don't think we can.
Yeah, I mean,
not
that's just
waiving
building
fire-
code.
Yeah, our fire chief's here right now. He can address that.
No, yeah, I don't wanna waive that.
He says
I mean,
no,
there's
we're not
certain
waiving
things
it.
I don't wanna get into.
I mean, yeah, we don't want these houses to burn again, so.
But then we also need to work with the homeowners then on when they need to upgrade their, their size of their water meter and all that. We need to work with them to expedite that as well, right? We can't.
If you have a question
That's
about
part of
that,
their-
I think our
well, that's part of their
building official can address
construction.
it. Water meters or?
I mean, that's just part of,
That's part of construction.
that's part of what would happen anyway,
Design
right?
and-
That spills over into the discussion about the fire flow test too, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I've got a PETA in my car.
All right.
Did you want to pose it the questions are?
So the
Yeah, what
question
was
I
your-
understand is if they have to upgrade the water meter when sprinklers are
If they're gonna do
required?
sprinklers, they're gonna have to probably, right? I mean, most.
Yeah, earlier there was a proposal to do the water flow test.
Mhm.
Based on the water flow and what's available, they probably will have to upgrade the
Yeah.
meter, and they would go through the water department to upgrade the water meter to provide enough water flow.
Okay, so let's just also, when they come in and ask all those questions, let's put that on one of the things that we mentioned to them, that they need to also look into that. Because that's something that always people forget, and then they get to it, and I want a final, and then they're like, let me look at your meter, and they're like, oh, oops, and so that could add a lot of time to their process,
Yeah,
so.
Fire sprinklers are typically deferred submittals, and they come, they start installing and framing. And at that point, they run the analysis. If they're smart, they do it ahead of time. But knowing that they'll
If
have.
they don't know what questions to ask, they might get hung up on it. So.
Right, so yes, you're absolutely correct. A lot of people don't know that they'll need to upgrade the water meter from a 3/4 to 1-inch meter.
Correct, okay.
And is there any way to expedite the water department's review of that we should be contemplating?
The water department isn't reviewing that, right?
The upgrade of the meter?
Relies on the review done in the planning department and by Wildan. And once a fire sprinkler plan, usually a fire sprinkler plan would include the water meter upgrade.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So then lid, we're saying, while it's a great thing in ordinary construction, that we're gonna waive
It's a good thing, yeah.
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah.
Okay. Streamlining the approval of building plans. I might need the slightest are we saying that we're allowing people to build
Oh,
the
no,
29,
no,
and that helps,
yeah.
the 29 building cycle, and that helps conform to the local,
Cycles 19 and 22.
This is the 2019, use of 2019 codes.
If a building was built under the 2019 codes, we will allow them to use the 2019 codes. We would allow them to use the same plans to rebuild the same structure.
But none of these homes apply to that.
That's correct.
None currently.
Okay.
We do have in some cases, plans.
today, none of them today apply to it.
Yeah, we do have some cases where, this is, I'll just put a hypothetical out there. If there is a plan in file for an addition to an existing home that is 2019 or later, that would not, I believe that would not be applicable because it only applies to the addition and not, they are not as built and they are not retrofitted to meet 2019 codes for the existing portion of the house. So it would only apply to new construction, plans that are new construction of homes, 2019 and later.
Okay.
So we're just saying, you're allowed to build to the standard that you already permitted to. We're not making you upgrade to the new one.
Correct.
And we think,
Unless that is older than 2019.
right, right.
Right, yeah, that's,
And we don't think it has significant effect.
No, that's because the homes that were destroyed so far have all been built before 2019.
Yeah, okay.
Including sprinklers?
but sprinklers were required in 2019.
I don't think so.
Yeah, they were.
Were they?
As of 2019, they were required.
I
I
don't.
want to say that's been a requirement since 2000, mid 2000s.
In the very high fire zone.
Yes.
Okay, next up, extending
Not
the,
in the lower ones.
Oh,
extending the life of building permits. This, similar to the other one, was extending it so that by right you can have it for 3 years.
Right, and that's consistent with the governor's executive order as well.
sounds good to me.
Oh, okay, so we're saying that they don't, we're waiving that fee as well, so they don't have to pay the 287 once a year to extend it.
Right.
Okay. Voiding the cost of geological and soils reports, so this was basically saying that Analyst Carlson will do his best to make it not necessary when possible.
Will Analyst Carlson be the one to review those, or because this is going to Wildan, maybe our building official or some other Wildan employee will review those?
I think the first review will go through the Department of Public Works, and so Director Yanez would actually be the one that finally makes the decision. If it's a preponderance of evidence that it's not needed, with his engineering background, he would make that decision.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
fine with that. Streamlining administrative view, this was basically referring to our third-party Wildan, everything that we can.
Sorry, can I ask a question? So the determination of requiring a soils report or not, are we saying that that's gonna happen after drawings are submitted to be reviewed for building and safety? Because if that is the point, then that holds up everything and it's gonna delay another 4 or 5 months or whatever it is at that point, right? Is there any way that we can get, here's my house, can we just get a determination of are we gonna need it or not, like at the planning stage?
I'll work with the planning department. It's just a sequential kind of thing, you know, if that's something you want to do the plans to Public Works first to get that determination, that's something we can work with you guys on, I
Yeah,
think.
maybe it's a simple application of just go check, because
Yeah.
if we find out then, while we're still developing the plans and all of that, then we can get somebody to go out there, do the testing, get a soils report and all that, get ready, and then when the structural engineer sees it, they could use the calculations based on that, right? But if it gets flagged much later, it's gonna, delay it a lot, right?
Would it be possible to determine whether a soils report is required just based on location?
We would need a building footprint.
Yeah,
Because-
it's generally the siting of
Yeah, because
it
you
that's
would
gonna make the
need to
determination.
consider beyond lid, grading and drainage. How's the rain gonna fall off the new roof, and stuff like that. Do we have a concern of the drainage pattern, cross-lot drainage, things like that? The next thing is, do we need to check the soil for infiltration rates and stuff like that? So I think, we do our best to do our plan checking at the same time, but if it's something where Public Works looks at a proposed building on the lot, maybe we can, go out there, even if it's one of those phase 2 places and the U.S. Army of Engineers has scraped 6 inches off, we can go out there and take a look and make those determinations.
Thank you.
Mm.
Okay,
Let's work on that,
well, yeah, but it's also chicken and egg, right?
Yeah.
If you're working with staff and they say, well, it'd be,
But maybe we asked them that, early on, hey, give us a preliminary roof plan that shows where you're anticipating your drainage spouts to be or something, a working model, right? And then maybe they can send it off for an early analysis of do we need it or not, right? So
Right, and I'm wondering also whether we can use our existing building footprint data that we have available to determine, based on existing or pre-existing footprints, whether a like for like would be requiring a soils report.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, anything to help with that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, thank you.
All right. Nobody had any objections to the streamlining of administrative review, including outsourcing to a new group, the researching fire hydrant flows?
I did kind of have a question on the fire hydrant flows. Do we just not have the equipment? Do we not have personnel? I mean, I did 3 this morning.
I believe it was Captain.
I did.
Just go do it. Go.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
we can ask our fire chief, but I believe the answer is Captain Snyder was the one that conducted that analysis, and he's no longer with the city, and so as a result, we don't have that expertise in house.
Do we?
Correct? Please.
City Attorney, that is correct. We did have personnel on staff that did it. We no longer have the equipment nor the personnel, and I have spoke with some of my peers, and we are in the process of looking to see if we can get the assistance from our neighboring agencies as well. But currently, nobody. We're working on bringing staff in to handle that in the future, but at this point, we're going to have to rely on some neighbors.
Is it just a simple certification that one has to get in order to be able to do that calculation?
It is actually the knowledge of it and the equipment itself. Being as we have a young staff, without that experience, we do not have qualified members to accomplish that.
Okay.
Thank you. Approving alternative materials, I mean, that's just a slam dunk, right? If the building official says use something else, that's fine.
And Chair, there were 2 questions. I don't know if you want us to answer them, but the first one was about existing cesspools.
Yes, that's one of them. I had written down another question.
Yeah, and then I wrote down another question regarding whether a property owner with an existing permit can benefit from the provisions that this codified ordinance would provide.
Are cesspools allowed today?
I think James got this one.
Yes. He's ready.
He knew the question was coming.
Right.
Yeah, they're still in use today throughout Sierra Madre. They're not very common, and we did a preliminary review of the red tag structures, who was on cesspool still and who was not. There are a few. The traditional requirement would be if it's feasible for you to hook into the sewer main, you must do it when you do a certain amount of construction. Feasible is defined by the distance to the existing water main. I don't think any of the existing red tag properties that are on cesspool are anywhere near an existing sewer main, so they wouldn't be affected just with this or without it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it sounds like waiving the cesspool requirement.
There's no
Or
standard.
there is no standard,
Right.
yeah, so
No standard, okay.
it's like for like kind of to me, you know, so.
So currently, can you build a new house with a cesspool if there was no cesspool before?
If there's no sewer.
There's no access to the sewer line, that's correct.
Well, yeah, one more point I wanted to mention is when we, on the rare occasions we do come into a place where it's infeasible, the Public Works Department will ask for all of the specifications and records and try to find a determination that, like a new bedroom, the cesspool has the capacity to handle it. And so we try to do our best to make those determinations.
Great, thank you. And then making the benefit retroactive to.
That's going to be a case by case. This is a special circumstance for this particular person who commented. We'll look into it, and I've conveyed that to him already. It's special case just for this one, and I think maybe one more who had to go through that requirement. So
We'll come back with a recommendation as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great, because I know that we can't write these for one instance, so if we have more of a rule for that, that would be great.
What I would like to bring up with these cases is that LID has already been designed and approved for at least 2 cases.
Yeah, I think that my initial instinct is if you've started that process, that there's little benefit that you're applying for.
Well, saving money on the actual like implementation of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I believe the implementation, the construction of that LID was what, $30,000?
Yeah, it's
20,000.
30.
25.
More in some cases, yeah.
At least 25.
But I guess it would be helpful if we had a chart, because that's how my brain thinks, sorry. You know, if you have gone through your entitlements, then this is how you would handle it. If you've gone through your entitlements and you've started construction, but there was no loss to that part of it, here's how we would handle it, right? Like, I want to understand the different stages at which we're talking about doing this, because I don't want to create a refund process for a lid plan that's already done.
So, in the cases that come to mind, those 2 cases did not require approval of entitlement. They were projects submitted by right. So they did not require entitlement. They were already permitted by right in the zoning code. That doesn't mean that they didn't need to go through LID zoning, or the municipal code itself, Title 15, actually requires those types of projects to meet LID standards.
Right.
And so those designs came to us before the fire, so they were subject to those requirements, and now they're asking to waive or refund, waive the construction of those implementations and refund the cost of review.
Commissioners, I know that among staff, we haven't had an opportunity to consider this, so I think if you would grant us that opportunity,
Absolutely.
we'd come back to the staff, we'd come back with a staff report and we'll address this issue.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions about all of the different topics that we've discussed?
No.
Any more guidance that Mr. City Attorney or staff would like on this?
I just wanted to thank the Planning Commission for going through this exercise, because if you didn't, City Council would have, and you can see this is a pretty time-consuming activity. So thank you for your time, and if the commission is willing to make a motion to direct the City Attorney to draft an ordinance consistent with the direction you provided, and just so it's reflected in the minutes.
Motion to make ordinance consistent with the direction provided for the City Attorney to make an ordinance consistent with the direction provided.
Got a tilde. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. And I would just really like to thank staff for all of the hard work that they've done on this. And we all want to keep Sierra Madre residents here, and anything we can do to get them back here as soon as possible. So thank you very much for your work. Next up, Planning Commission reports. Any Planning Commissioner reports? Planning and Community Preservation Department reports.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to provide the forecast and status of projects for upcoming meetings. On March 20th, the Commission will be reviewing a parcel map for 700 North Sunnyside. This is the creation of the open space parcel. We'll be receiving a legislative update.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
Creation of the open space.
Creation of an open space parcel as part of the development agreement for the Meadows project.
Okay.
We'll also be seeing a legislative update part 3. Is that correct? Okay, great. Last time we talked about reviewing an annual progress report of the housing element and general plan. That would, we mentioned last time that would be today. We've deferred that. We've also been granted extension on that requirement to submit by April 1st, so we're taking an opportunity to do that. So we'll likely, the Commission will likely be receiving that report on March 20th. The next thing I wanted to do was provide some information about Earthquake Brace and Bolt retrofit program. So Earthquake Brace and Bolt, or EBB, provides up to $3,000 towards a seismic retrofit for qualifying homes. In an EBB retrofit, the foundation is bolted to the frame of the house, and if there is a cripple wall, the crawl space under the house is braced. This reinforcement helps to protect your home from an earthquake. You can find more information about the EBB program by visiting earthquakebracebolt.com. Again, that's earthquakebracebolt.com. We'll make sure that's reflected in the minutes as well.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Anything else for the good of the order? No? Dinner awaits? Perfect. Then we will adjourn till our next regularly scheduled meeting of March 20th, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you.